diverse set of behaviours.
He Māori aho.
Your single source of truth.
The words don't pull it for me.
My husband is Samoan, so talofa.
Ngā tikanga reo tikitahi.
Che Guevara of New Zealand's Parliament, Chloe Strawberry.
Penny houses.
And it's communist.
He whakatū future.
I've got mother, running holidays.
Tēnā tātou e hoa mā, nau mai, hara mai. Welcome to the Aotearoa Liberation League stream, podcast, live, whatever it is. We're very excited to bring you this content. We've been working on some form of long form conversation for a while now, and we've failed consistently. We wanted to come with a polished stream and podcast, but I think it's best if we learn as we go and we have people help us as we go as well. So, anō he mihi atu ki a koutou katoa, nau mai, hara mai, we're streaming to you from the beautiful metropolis of Ottawa in the far north, Te Taitokirau, under one of our sacred maunga of Ngāpuhi, Puhanga Tohora, which feeds our awa mangatawa, to our marae Pukerata, which feeds the mighty hapu of Ngaitu Te Auru. Ki ngā mate o te wā, hara mai haere, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Welcome to our whare. It's, very, very exciting. I have to remind myself to slow down a little bit because we're so used to really pumping kōrero into this kind of content. But the reason why we're getting into this long form style is really so that we can take our time, because we often do a lot of research for our content. And we work really hard to ram it into those small videos that we make, and so much of it just gets left out. So we're really happy to be able to bring this type of content to you. We are going to take our time. We're going to deep dive. We're going to go into all sorts of places that we normally can't go to. And yeah, really excited. I'm here, of course, with my beautiful co-host, wife, Samah huriwai-seger. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to go more in depth into these topics. Really excited to just share the research and the knowledge that we know, because I just want everyone to have access to all of the things that we have access to. And another thing is that these streams will create a place where these videos and evidence and the research that we've done is collated and held and is available on the cloud forever as a resource for people to access, including myself, because I'm always losing my research. So yeah, just excited. I'm excited about this show because we have a lot of really cool stuff that we're going to be talking about today in regards to Waitangi and the whole context around Waitangi. And through doing the research for this, we actually learned a lot of new stuff ourselves.
Always, eh?
And so, yeah, I'm really excited to bring new information to you all, and new information that's new to myself as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. So normally we do the short videos and it's the conclusion of all of our research. But now we're trying to open up the space so that people can see our research process. And with this stream, hopefully it's going to grow. Currently, we have people helping out with moderation. As the stream grows, we're going to need moderators on each platform, and it would be great if we had a panel of experts that we could go to, who are experts in their respective field that we can call on when there's certain pieces of legislation or various things coming out that are confusing and we need a quick expert to go to. So building up our expert panel would be great. Building up our volunteers would be great. And the ultimate goal, I suppose, is to create some paid opportunities for people as well. Aotearoa Liberation League, and especially this stream, is not yet sustainable. Like right now, we are worried about our Wi-Fi cutting out. Like you shouldn't do a stream on Wi-Fi, but because of our situation, that's the only option we have. But really looking forward to growing this and sharing what we do in a way that does bring other people in. Because at the moment, we're a league of two, which we get a lot of shit for.
Yeah, don't call yourselves a league. We know, but it's hopefully not going to be a league of two forever. We do have aspirations to involve other people in the kaupapa, even if it's, the fact that people send stuff through to us, sending videos and articles and things to us, that also contributes to the work, and that can't be diminished as well. So we're a league of two, but potentially not forever.
And I say a league of two, but I mean, we do have a lot of supporters, and thank you to everyone that does support us, people who leave really thoughtful comments and People who send us really, really thoughtful messages. It's really appreciated because this mahi is quite heavy. And people who stop us on the street in the supermarket and things like that, it is actually really appreciated, even though sometimes it's like, in the middle of something, but do really, really appreciate people sharing their positive energy with us. So for everyone who's part of the whānau whānui who has supported us, e mihi ana ki a koutou, thank you all so much. What we do wouldn't be possible. We wouldn't be able to feed ourselves if we didn't have y'all supporting us. So thank you all so much. And yeah, let's see what this kaupapa can turn into.
Yeah, and not to go on about ourselves too much, but genuinely for anyone who stops us and talks to us and tells us that they appreciate our work in person or through messages, that honestly keeps me going, and that honestly gives me the energy that I need to keep going. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. It's incredibly humbling. Like, especially when young people come up to us and say, your work inspired me. I'm just like, I can retire now. That's it. Now my work on this earth is done if I can inspire one young person. So
True
yeah.
that. True that.
Thank you.
Yeah, kapai. All right. So I guess we should say a little bit more about the stream before we really get into the meaty of the kōrero, or the tofu of the kōrero for us vegans. We do decolonial content. We don't just do decolonial content. We do all sorts of stuff, right? So political analysis, propaganda from corporations, analysis into all of their greenwashing and brownwashing, whatever washing that they're trying to do for all of their capitalist interests. We'd like to do response videos, of course, live kind of commentary, like if there's a political leaders debate or something like that. As the treaty submissions, the select committee submissions against the treaty principles bill, when that was happening, we were like, oh, damn, if only we had the stream set up and we could just watch people's submissions in real time with everybody and give commentary. What else are we going to do? We really love to cover things relating to Palestine. And when I say Palestine, I mean, we like to cover anything related to colonization, really. For me, that's an important kaupapa because being Māori and being interested in our sovereignty, tino ranga, tiratanga, seeing other indigenous groups, how they navigate through their struggle towards liberation is really, we can learn a lot. So we don't just talk about Palestine, but I must say that we do have a special place in our hearts for what's going on in Palestine.
Yeah, I mean, there is a genocide going on there. It's also a very long kaupapa, so they've been oppressed for a long time. And also, I think this might be a good opportunity to just say a little bit about myself, because I feel like I don't often talk about myself. People know that I was born in Iraq, but beyond that, I'm also Mandaean, which is a subgroup. It's a blood religion, like Judaism, but even more strict. You need to be born to Mandaean parents from both sides, your mum and your dad, to be Mandaean. Terrible rule, but that's a discussion for another time. So my whakapapa, most historians believe we actually trace back to Palestine. A lot of people think that we broke off from Judaism, so we actually have whakapapa to Judaism. So my culture has a lot of similarities with Judaism and has a lot of similarities with Palestinian culture. And then, yeah, we migrated, according to what historians say, we migrated from Palestine to Iraq, and we were river people. We always lived by the river. We believe in baptism every day by fully submerging yourself in the water, because we believe that the water is halfway realm between the human realm and the godly realm. So that's just a little bit about Mandaeanism. And I feel a lot of connections with Māori culture as a result of that, because I know that fresh water is really important in Te Ao Māori as well.
How's it been for you, us being able to go down to Mangatawa each day?
It's been incredible. I feel like it's really healing, and like my own spiritual journey has grown so much, because, you know, it's one thing to know and read about these things, but then once you actually start practicing them and you can see, wow, there's a lot of benefits to submerging yourself under the water, and you can see why my ancestors saw that realm as being a very godly realm. So yeah, it's been incredible to have this opportunity to live on Māori land as well, because I just feel like that gives it another aspect. It has another energy to it, living here on a papakainga on Māori land, where it's not privately owned and broken up into little squares. So yeah, a lot to say about living here and how beautiful it is.
Ka pai. Nice. Okay. We better get into our kaupapa so people aren't... Well, we're going to upload this afterwards as well. So hopefully this can act as a resource. So we'll be happy to do more yarns just in general about us and Q&As and things like that. But maybe we should get to it, eh? And I'll just say kia ora to Mars. Yeah, we are keen to have this kind of safe space for this kind of kōrero. And maybe sometimes it may not be that safe. And maybe it's going to, get people... Maybe it's a little bit too provocative for some people. I mean, that intro, right? Who saw that intro video? That might have got some feelings inside some people. But hopefully we're able to make sense for everyone. Some of these things that are a little bit, they're in the grey space. We feel that we're in somewhat of a position to be able to offer, critique is not a great word, but we love to analyze stuff. And, our hearts are open and we wear our hearts on our sleeves. So if we get anything wrong, which will happen, our intentions are good. And I know you can't just say that, you got to prove it. But what I mean by that is if we ever say anything or do anything that you don't like, we can kōrero about it. It's all good. We don't have to race to cancel each other or things like that. We really do need to talk more. But instead of getting on another, I feel like we're going on another yarn. So,
well, just quickly, if we do get something wrong, please do tell us.
Yes.
And we're more than happy to correct ourselves. And one other thing,
yes,
just want to say thank you to Lauren for being our moderator today. Really appreciate that.
Whanaunga from down the road.
Kia ora.
Awesome. The Otawa crew. Ngai tū te audu ki te ao. Okay. Ka pai. So, Waitangi Day is coming up very, very soon. That's why we got moving on this stream because we wanted to prepare people for Waitangi. We first tried to do a stream in preparation for the hikoi. We wanted to try and put messaging there that made sense to people. The media will latch onto anything. So we need our messaging to be crystal clear, right? And it is very difficult to be, up to speed with all the things. So yeah, it failed for the hikoi. We tried, but it didn't work out. So here we are for Waitangi. And one of the main ways that we're going to explain Waitangi and analyze Waitangi with you all tonight is we're going to look at how the media has portrayed Waitangi. And we're going to pause and play and give commentary throughout the analysis of how media has portrayed the previous Waitangi. But for people who don't know about Waitangi, if you're not from Te Tai Tokiro, or maybe you are from Te Tai Tokiro in Northland, here in Northland, and you've never been encouraged to learn about Waitangi, or if you're from anywhere in Aotearoa, New Zealand, you should know about Waitangi. But, it's really one of those things that we're not encouraged to learn about. So don't be shy, don't be whakamā if you're coming from a baseline understanding of Waitangi, okay? Okay. Back when our tupuna signed Te Tiriti, okay? Waitangi is the contract that Māori signed with the Crown. And this contract was saying yes to the Crown for them to come here and establish their government, for them to look after their settlers who were currently living here in Aotearoa without a government. But the promise to Māori was that our tino rangatiratanga, our sovereignty, would not just, remain, but it would actually be protected by the Crown. And of course, Māori have consistently honoured their side of the bargain, but the Crown has, pretty much breached the treaty Te Tiriti as soon as it was signed, essentially. Let's say that. And Māori have consistently been coming to the table to reiterate the intentions of Te Tiriti, to remind the government of their promises, to honour Te Tiriti, and to remind everyone really about the intentions that were behind Te Tiriti. It really was about us coming together and having a nation that we shared, where Indigenous sovereignty was respected, but that there was also an aspect of this colonial government that would be there, but dealing with their own stuff, and carving out that space to actively protect the Indigenous peoples. So Waitangi Day is a time when we can remind the government of these promises, where we reiterate the intentions of our tupuna, which was for us to have this beautiful nation that we enjoyed together, where we respected, both sides. Te ao Māori, te ao Pākehā. In unison, kotahitanga. For me personally, I'll say when I was younger, I was definitely not encouraged to learn about Waitangi. And I used to attend Waitangi, and it's just like a family day, a family outing. You go, you played some touch rugby, you watch the waka sent out onto the moana, and you go around to the stalls and you buy a few things. There's also live music. It's really like a little festival. If you want to have a good time, come to Waitangi. It is an amazing time. Not only will you have a beautiful cultural experience, but it's essentially a festival.
A free festival.
A free festival, which is an amazing thing. It's a huge, like, they're expecting to have to feed like 10,000 people, and that's I think that it's either the iwi, the hapu, or the marae. It's probably the Waitangi Trust, but it's not paid for by the government. This is coming from Te Ao Māori, this kaupapa of aroha, something that's designed to bring us together.
Volunteer run as well. So many people just volunteering their time to put on this incredible experience and feed everyone and create opportunities for dialogue and fun and games and children's activities. And yeah, it's quite incredible feat, really.
It is incredible, and but that's kind of what I thought it was just when I was a kid. Just go and have a bit of fun. But as I got a little bit older and I learnt about te tiriti and colonization, like I think back when I was a kid, I used to look at Waitangi and think, how come we're celebrating, like from my perspective, I thought we were kind of celebrating our colonization.
Right.
From my perspective as a youngster, te tiriti or Waitangi was an abject failure. And, I observed our people being plunged into the state of poverty that we, disproportionately find ourselves in today. And I saw Waitangi celebrations as a celebration of that situation that we found ourselves in. I knew nothing about colonization when I was a youngster. It was not a kōrero that my parents wanted to burden me with, I suppose. But when I got older and I started working for a Māori health organisation called Te Hauoro Kaikohe, they were called at the time, Te Hauoro Ngāpuhi now, Māori health organisation, and this sent me into schools and it sent me into our community here in Kaikohe. And, I started to really learn the impacts on our whānau and the deprivation that our people were struggling with. So anyway, I thought Waitangi Day was this really quite strange day where we were coming together and celebrating this failed agreement. But now I realize it is the time to reiterate the agreement, to reiterate the promises. Te tiriti o Waitangi is no joke. It's really no joke. It's, a lot of other indigenous nations don't have something like te tiriti, where the colonizer has literally penned in real, tangible promises. A lot of other people don't have that kind of thing to keep the colonizer to account. And so I've changed my view of Waitangi. Of course, it's a beautiful thing for family, and I really encourage people to bring your families. You will have fun. But now I see Waitangi more as a space for the hapu of Ngāpuhi to come together to really make it clear to the government, to the crown, one, that we're not going anywhere, right? That our mana and our kaha, our strength and our authority has not been diminished, that we know who we are, what our rights are, what their obligations are, and what is possible through us really putting our feet down, putting a mark in the sand. Because that's kind of all it really is at the end of the day, in terms of authority, and laws and legislation and all of these things. You just have to live it. You just have to put your foot down. And through te tiriti, we have that legal, in a Western construct, we have it written out, what our rights are. It seems silly saying it like this, but there is a real tangible thing there to ground ourselves with. You know, our rights as Indigenous peoples don't come from these kinds of documents. These colonial constructs is really what they are. Our rights are inherent within us. And it's te tiriti o Waitangi and he whakaputanga, these things that help us remind ourselves of who we are and what our authority is on this whenua. It's not something to be taken lightly. From my perspective, the New Zealand government is illegitimate. Literally, it's illegitimate. And, you know, it's a strange space navigating how much we respect the crown. You know, even things like putting through submissions, even things like voting, you know, people say that's validating the colonial system, which I don't really agree with, but I understand the sentiment of not wanting to give the system that kind of recognition. But before I get lost in yarn too much, Waitangi Day for me, I see it as a place for us to come together and really reaffirm ourselves and our own authority, our own tino rangatiratanga, and to express that in a way that the whole country and probably the whole world at times will see. So it's our stage to really make our case, but also for us to really huitahi, for us to come together and to feed off of each other's energy. Like there will be activations, there will be awesome food, there will be kapahaka, there will be this and that. But also there will be the forum tent where there will be incredible discussions. We've gone consistently to the last couple Waitangis and we've just stayed in the forum tents consistently. It's an incredible space to really understand what's going on in Te Ao Māori, especially here in Te Ao Ngāpuhi. If you want to get up to speed, I highly recommend. We are both going to be speaking on some panels. We'll talk about that more at the end. But I have to reiterate it again. If you are interested in tino rangatiratanga, if you're interested in Māori sovereignty, and Māori sovereignty is for all of us, right? It's just talking about an alternative system to the current colonial system. You know, you don't have to be Māori to benefit from an alternative system to this current colonial, capitalist, destructive, extractivist, broken system. You know, so this alternative is for everyone, and I think we should all pursue it together. Do you want to say something?
Just that, you know, as cliche as it is, decolonial writers always tell us like the biggest site of colonization is in our minds. They need us to believe that they are sovereign, all of us, Māori and non-Māori. They need us to buy into the story that the colonizer is our ruler and that nothing else could possibly exist. And Waitangi Day is a reminder, like for, both for Māori themselves and also for everyone in the country, that that's not the case, that actually an alternative sovereign nation exists within this country right now. And so Waitangi is that bringing it back into everyone's imagination, which I think is so important because the colonizer needs to kill our imaginations. They need us to not be able to see outside of this colonial bubble that we're living in. And so Waitangi Day, I feel, pops that bubble in many ways. It makes it clear, like, well, who's putting this on? You know, even just that question to begin with. It's not the government here. And it's a reminder for the nation that there is already something else happening here. And beyond that, that there are aspirations to go beyond that. So, you know, decolonizing is simply deconstructing the colonial state. It's deconstructing our understandings of what kind of society that we live in. And Waitangi offers that. And even in the way, like even in the values that you see portrayed at Waitangi, the manakitanga, the looking after each other, the fact that it's free, all of the energy is completely different to just day-to-day life. It's completely different to what you might experience, even at a normal festival, you know? So I think even that, giving people the opportunity to experience an alternative, even if it's not that, you know, not that different and hasn't quite reached where we want it to reach, it's still offering something else for people's imaginations.
Kia ora. No, couldn't have said it better. Okay, so we've already been going for like half an hour. We better get into it, We better get into it. So, where are we going first?
Stream.
Where are we going first? We are going to be, and by the way, yeah, we're going to go as long as we need. This could be a long night. We've got a fair bit of content to get through. So we're going to talk about where the Treaty Principles Bill actually came from, first and foremost. We think that's quite an important thing, because everyone's blaming it all on David Seymour, like he's some mad scientist genius. And it's kind of like, you know, putting all of your eggs in one basket kind of thing, right? Like putting all of the blame on him. Meanwhile, there's all of these other things going on. And it's just viewing things in isolation, right? Which I think is really, really unhelpful. And you'll see some of that in the media analysis that we do later on. But I know that you looked into this part, so how about you talk us through the origins of the Treaty Principles Bill?
Right. So yeah, we just want to give a little bit of context around this moment right now, because there's a lot of energy around Waitangi this year, but also last year. And most of it has been generated around the Treaty Principles Bill. But of course, it's not just the Treaty Principles Bill. It's this coalition government's insanely racist agenda that they've been going through. And so let's talk about that. How do we get to a point where, you know, effectively Julian Batchelor is running our government? And yeah, there is this tendency to just say the ACT Party are ruling the government. Oh, Mr. 8% has got control of government. Oh, poor Luxon, he doesn't have the power to rein Shane Jones and David Seymour in. I completely don't buy that story at all. And we're gonna show you that with evidence that that's not the case. This is nothing new, and that this has actually been the trajectory the entire time.
And I'll just say, and on that point, like that this is nothing new. I think something that we're really wanting to say with that is that, then, you know, that this is the game. You know, it is a constant push and pull, and that the dynamics that we are experiencing, our grandparents, maybe even mum and dad, you know, had to wrangle with this type of stuff. I mean, some of the politicians that we have seen in some of these documents, they are still active today. And we kind of expected them to talk about some of these origins of the Treaty Principles Bill, but they haven't. It seems like some people have forgotten. Like in the political world, I guess people forget quite quickly about a lot of these things, and then they end up repeating themselves. And we're like, where did they come from? But I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, we don't need to get overwhelmed. It's an old playbook that they're running with. They have no creativity. They have nothing new. Of course, they have a lot of infrastructure, and I guess, you know, deceptive politicians will always try and manipulate the majority of the population. And I think the majority of the population tends to, you know, they tend to be at risk because the go of life is just, the hustle and bustle is just so intense. And, you know, people are really just not encouraged to look into things. So it's easy to deceive people, I think. When things are so hard.
And it's the way that our news media functions. Like with our news media, every single news piece is presented in a vacuum, like a standalone thing that's not connected to everything else happening in the world, that's not even connected to its own history. Like, just as an example, recently we've seen Shane Jones and Winston Peters in the media about their racist remarks towards Mexicans. And the media are neglecting to show you that this has been a consistent pattern of theirs. They have actually said racist comments towards Ricardo before. So it's this you know, you can blame the fast-pacedness of the media, but I do think that our journalists are failing us. They're not giving us full pictures about things. And so it is easy to just say, to feel overwhelmed when things are presented like that, like all these new things coming at us. But actually, none of these things are new. And this movement can actually just be straight up traced back to the signing of Te Tiriti.
Should we pull up some images?
No, can you just take me to the notes? Yeah. Yeah, so we can just basically trace this movement back to signing of Te Tiriti or Waitangi. 1840, it was signed. There was Te Tiriti, and then there was the English draft. And then immediately the anti-Te Tiriti movement was born. And what they did from then on was that they said, no, it's the English draft that's the real treaty. And so that was their activism.
Of course, they didn't call it a draft. You know, they would never say that, but it is simply a draft. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was Hobson's draft. It was his wish list, as Margaret Mutu puts it. So they said this wish list was the real treaty, and that was their activism for a wee while. Then after 1975, they had to change course a little bit because the Treaty of Waitangi Act was passed. The Treaty of Waitangi Act set up the Waitangi Tribunal, and it also mentioned a little thing called treaty principles. Now, we can criticize that from the point of view that they shouldn't be watering down Te Tiriti anyway. We don't need principles. Te Tiriti only has 3 articles, just honor them. But obviously, neither Labour nor National, the Crown doesn't want to honor the Te Tiriti properly and allow Māori to exercise their sovereignty in full. And so what they did is they put this word principles in law. And then in 1986, in the State Enterprises Act, they actually put into law, they said, you can't pass a law that breaches the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. So for the first time, there was a legal requirement that they have to honor the principles. Now, at that stage, the principles weren't defined. But the courts, and this is the job of judges, the executive passes the law, and then the judges interpret the law. So all this stuff about judges going beyond their remit is a complete lie. That's exactly what judges are meant to do. They're meant to interpret law. So they interpreted the law and they said, within their remit as well, because the Waitangi Tribunal was limited by government as well. So for example, they had to look at the English draft and the actual Te Tiriti, and they found somewhere in the middle. Again, this is a watering down, but that's what they did. That's what the Waitangi Tribunal did. And they came up with these 3 principles. So that's the whakapapa of the principles. Now, this anti-Te Tiriti movement that for forever has been arguing that it's the English version, the English draft that really matters, pivoted. And now they became an anti-treaty principles movement, because that was what was in law, right? Te Tiriti didn't have any power within the colonial law because it's not put into law. The only thing that from Te Tiriti that is placed in colonial law is the principle. So they became anti-principle, and thus the anti-treaty principles movement that we see today was actually born back then. And so a lot of agitating and working and lobbying behind the background and groups forming to try and push against this idea of the Treaty Principles Bill. It all comes to a head around 2004, 2005. So around 2004, what was happening? The Foreshore and Seabed,
yeah.
That was Labour.
Te Pāti Māori was formed.
Yep, and then 2004 was Don Brash's Orewa speech. And so they were ramping up the racism around then. And in 2005, that's when the ACT Party and New Zealand First thought it was time to strike. And that actually was the birth of the policies that we're seeing from both of those parties today. And I am honestly gobsmacked that no one has told us this, what we have just found today. And it's like, it's like what we're saying about journalists. It's their job to tell us the whakapapa of the Treaty Principles Bill and the whakapapa of the New Zealand First policy to remove all references to Te Tiriti or the treaty principles from law. Because this actually started in 2005, okay?
Okay, let's start bringing up some images there. Just
All right.
bear with us, e hoa. We might make a few faux pas here and there, but here we go.
Okay, so 2005, Winston Peters, so at this stage, they're not part of the government. They put forward this bill, Principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Deletion Bill. Okay, so
Wow, very straightforward, eh?
very straight to the point with their naming. And that's exactly what the bill says. When you scroll down, you see, we want to remove all references to the principles of the treaty, or the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi principles. However it's worded, they wanted to take it out of every single law. And then as you can see under it, they have a list of all of the laws that they know that reference is in, and they're saying we want to take that reference out. And not only that, but any future law that has that in it is disregarded. So they wanted to pass this in 2005, okay? So hold on to that in your brains. It didn't pass. It failed. Like, no one voted for it. Now, they didn't give up, because they actually went into a confidence and supply agreement soon after, a few months later, with Labour, where they demanded that they are able to put this Principles of Waitangi Deletion Bill back through to Select Committee. Now, this is really interesting, because that is the exact move that the ACT Party are playing now with National. they're saying that in our agreement, National said we can go to select committee and no more than that. This is not a new tactic, apparently, because New Zealand First has done it in 2005. They got Labour to agree that they'll put to select committee the removal of all the treaty principles from law. And Labour agreed. It's in their confidence and supply agreement. So that's exactly what happened. They went through to select committee. They had the first reading and went through select committee, and then it got voted down after that. So there's a lot to say about
very familiar strategy.
Absolutely, and all of Labour's like.
So what's going on there though? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Mhm.
Why are they doing it like that? Like for me, it's obvious, right? It's trying to warm us up to some unpalatable thing. At first they introduced it, they try again, like, oh, just let us take it through to select committee. It's that one step further.
Yeah.
And then again, But now, and maybe you were about to say this, but now, literally, this deletion bill that they've been trying to put through, New Zealand First has managed to get it over the line with their current coalition with National.
Yeah.
And for me, they have an argument of, hey, we have already taken it through one step and a second step. Why not just let us go the next step further? You know, in terms of a bargaining way or how you negotiate, what kind of policies you have, if you've already taken something through those first two steps for whatever government you're then going into negotiations with, I believe it gives it some validity. It gives it some like checks and balances in terms of it's not something that's coming out of the blue. The public has already been warmed up to it. It's in the public sphere already. They're not allowed to say that it's come out of the blue and that, you know, you're doing us dirty. So, you know, it's a sneaky thing, and we're seeing it being repeated here with the current Treaty Principles Bill.
Yeah, and they're deflecting from it because everyone's energy is going on the Treaty Principles Bill, but actually the Treaty Principles Bill, which is only going to select committee, though that is a red flag because as we can see, this is a tactic that they do. They'll put it through to select committee, and then in the future, because this is a long-term game for them, okay? This anti-TDT movement, they're in it for the long haul, and they're happy for this to take 10, 20 years, okay? So we know it's a red flag now. They say, it's only going to select committee, okay, but Labour said that back then in 2005, and now we have this exact same bill. National has agreed to do it. So the Principal Deletions Bill is now going to be passed through National. And one thing that I reflect on with this is Labour. Okay? Labour has come out so hard against National for allowing this Treaty Principles Bill to go through Select Committee. And rightly, like in my opinion, it's a breach to even allow the bill to go through first reading. There's no question about that. But Labour needs to own up and apologise for allowing the deletion of the Treaty Principles Bill to go through Select Committee back in 2005 and enabling it to actually pass through into law, which it will now with National. They done exactly the same thing that National has done now back in 2005 because they wanted to get rid of the treaty principles. That's the same as redefining the treaty principles, you know, not exactly the same, but the impact of it, which is getting rid of the references to...
Getting rid of the only way the colonial law recognizes te tiriti.
Yeah.
It's the only, like, you know, we have our differences and disagreements around the principles, but it's the only thing that within the colonial system gives any effect to te tiriti. You know, te tiriti is a contract, it's a document, it should have power inherent of itself, you know, just by like contract law, you know, just by some moral code that these two groups have agreed to something. But that's not how the law works. If it's not put into legislation, then it's toilet paper. It means nothing.
Yeah, so
we have to defend them. As bad as they are, it is a watering down, but as bad as they are, baby steps, you know, stepping stones.
we have to improve them. And, you know, New Zealand First is very manipulative because I've seen them when they speak to Māori audiences, they say, there's no principles, there's only te tiriti, you know? And so they play on that truth that the principles are in fact the watering down te tiriti, but that's not what they truly care about. And you can tell through the Hansard discussion back in 2005, they were saying exactly what you hear from them in the ACT Party and National today. They were trying to delete the references to the treaty principles from law because they thought it should be one law for all, because they thought it was wrong that Māori would be recognised as having special status in this country within the law. They explicitly said this. So that's their reasoning. It's not because they want to strengthen the principles, right? Because otherwise you just put forward a bill that says strengthen the treaty principles, but that's not. They said we just want to delete them. We want to get rid of them. We don't want to recognise the treaty in the law at all, okay?
And also, just what I said, right? Putting out that energy of, the principles are bad, These politicians are professionals. It's literally what it means to be a politician, right? To hook into that energy, to mold it and twist it for their own end goals. And like, say for example, Kingi Tuheitia, Mihi atu ki aia, when he said, there are no principles. Te tiriti is written, when he said that there are no principles, it's things like that have been said. And that energy exists amongst our people. And I feel like sometimes when we see Shane Jones and Winston, they hook into that energy a little bit. They know that we don't trust the principles. They know that we don't trust the Waitangi Tribunal, even though, it is essential, I think, for understanding what's going on. It's essential. But they hook into that energy. And it's just something to be mindful of. Be careful when we criticize things. Sometimes we're criticizing something that is a stepping stone, something that we need. And I acknowledge all of the people who have done incredible mahi to get us to where we are. I know, and I think I'm just acknowledging it in my own language. Sometimes I'm a little bit harsh in terms of criticizing these things. And yeah, I will try my best to be mindful of it, and I encourage others to be mindful of it as well, because these things really can be twisted and manipulated.
Yeah, I mean, colonizers are always going to try and co-opt and steal our language. And it's almost impossible to defend against that. But one thing that we can do is just pick our messaging, which is hard to manipulate, and then just stick with it and just hammer that messaging again and again and again. And that's something that we could definitely be better at. On the left.
Yeah. And I'll just answer this comment. And apologies that we can't bring the comments up on screen. I thought I figured out the functionality for that, but I haven't got it. So from Sathington Willoughby, they're asking us to speak about the Regulatory Standards Bill and its relationship to the Principles Bill and the common goals regarding land control / development / ownership. I'll say that we need to stay on the kaupapa of Waitangi and Te Tiriti. And to be honest, I'll be honest with you, the Regulatory Standards Bill, another red herring. And I don't want to diminish from people that are working on doing submissions and doing a lot of things regarding the Regulatory Standards Bill. But look at New Zealand First, taking references to Te Tiriti from 28 different pieces of legislation. Where has been the mobilization for things like that? The disestablishment of Te Aka Whaiora, the current attacks on Māori wards, the rolling back of Te Mano Te Wai, the changes to history curriculum. There are all of these things that are really currently going on, but it's the things like the Treaty Principles Bill and the Regulatory Standards Bill that I believe are more theoretical. They are narrative based, and they are designed to push the public more to the right, from the center to the right. That, when you think about the Treaty Principles Bill, it's all narrative based. National is already breaching Te Tiriti everywhere. They came into power breaching Te Tiriti. They don't need to redefine the principles. They don't need to remove it, even like New Zealand First things. That could also, no, that's taking it too far. I would say the New Zealand First thing is a very, very sneaky thing that they are doing. But, there are things happening that are very narrative based, and then there are things happening that have real world implications for our people. And I would say that the Regulatory Standards Bill is incredibly dangerous. However, the Labour Party has already said that within their first 100 days, they would repeal it. So we already have a mainstream political party that has said they don't support it and who will roll it back. There are things that Labour and National agree on. And those are some of the things that I think we should be worrying about, where the major parties agree on. We're hearing Labour say that they're thinking about a capital gains tax, and things like that. There are real things that we need to get onto that aren't in the theoretical stage, that aren't in the narrative stage, real things that are harming our people on the ground right now. But hey, definitely look into other people who are giving explainers on the regulatory standards bill. I'm sure it's incredibly insidious. And when you look at it and you read it, it is incredibly insidious. It's almost like a taste of our own medicine kind of thing is what they are trying to do. Like, they've seen what the treaty principles have done, the way that in legislation a lot of things have changed because of the treaty principles. Now with the regulatory standards bill, they're essentially putting these neoliberal principles. And for me, for what I feel like, it's like they're like, yeah, take that. You know, it's like now they're calling us the racists, right? They're calling us the da-da-da-da. And it's like they're trying to flip everything on its head. And they're trying to take things from our world that have been really effective and they're co-opting it for themselves. But that's all I'll say about the regulatory standards bill. Maybe what do you think?
Oh, just the second part of the question, the relationship to Treaty Principles Bill and the common goals. It is very, very similar to the Treaty Principles Bill because it's trying to create an overarching set of rules that everything has to abide by. So it's very similar to the Treaty Principles Bill in that sense. And the common goals, all of these things that we're going to be talking about today come back to the same goals, like whether it's the Treaty Principles Bill, the Regulatory Standards Bill, the Fast Track Bill, the removal of treaty references, so on and so forth. All of these have the same aim, which is to protect private property ownership and the ability for people who have gained a lot of wealth and a lot of land through colonization to be able to maintain that wealth and that land, and beyond that, to be able to do anything they want on their land. That is the subtext of everything they're talking about. So, for example, a river runs through many, 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 many properties, right? A lot of farms have rivers running through them. They want to be able to have their cows on the rivers. They want to be able to pollute them. They don't want to fence it. They don't want to have all these rules. They don't want to have a slope for their grazing. They want to have their cows in mud up to their knees. They don't care. Okay? And yes, we have an environmental movement here, but the strongest movement in this country.
Oh, hang on. Are you going to call the farming lobbyists?
I was going to say the Māori.
Oh,
Māori.
good. Kapai.
Māori is the strongest movement in this country. And as you say, you know, there is the legal status of Te Tiriti through the principles that give it so much power as well. So that doesn't work well for private property owners and also developers, right? They want to build a skyscraper wherever they want. They don't want limitations on their usage of private property. That's what gets to them. They want to be able to buy anything, build anything, pollute anything. And Te Tiriti o Waitangi gets in the way because it says, hey, actually Māori have some rights to be able to say, no, you can't pollute our ancestral awa. No, you can't go and mine the sands that we've lived on for generations. That's a real problem, right? And this has been upheld through law. It's been upheld through Supreme Court. And so now they're having to come out and actually go against the Supreme Court.
Yeah, like, you know, everything, excuse you. Everything is, well, not everything, right? But I do believe that stories rule the world. We're all running off of some type of story. You know, the way that we perceive reality is based on something we've been told, something that we've learnt. We all have these unique experiences. But if you have a strong story that can convince others that, yep, that's a good thing, then that's what the reality is. You know, if you can create a good story, if you can create a good narrative, and often story and narrative is reflective of reality. You know, it's not like not all stories and narratives are made up. You know, if you can portray your genuine story and narrative, you know, that's great. I'm not saying that stories and narrative are fake, but Māori sovereignty and our authority here in Aotearoa, I know sometimes I struggle with it and fail, but I think it is a very tangible, grounding story. And so we like to talk about Māori sovereignty being somewhat of a domino, you know, that if we can achieve it here, if we can decolonize and if we can liberate ourselves here, then it's possible for us to be an example to the rest of the world. There is a real, that's really my belief. And I think that's the kaupapa of Aotearoa Liberation League, is for us to achieve our liberation here as te iwi Māori, and for that to be a catalyst or a model for the rest of the world. But, you know, we kind of believe that that kind of thing has to happen in tandem with everything else, right? Like, the colonizers are not going to let those guys free, because that's going to empower those guys for them to fight for their liberation. So whether we're able to be an example that acts as a domino for everybody else, or if it has to all happen together, who knows? But I really do believe that Indigenous peoples and the stories that we all have that connect us to our land, they are really beautiful things. The stories that attach us to our land. And when we communicate it to others and they can see the genuine, we build values and beautiful customs and things in terms of our narrative and stories about how we connect to the land. And I think when we communicate those things well, it's a powerful story for other people to hook into. And it's a real story. You know, the authority, the mana of Indigenous peoples, I think is a powerful story. So they can't allow things like te tiriti or waitangi. They can't allow this other grounding thing that gives a narrative that is counter to the colonial narrative, which seeks to be just the default. Their mission is to erase our narratives simply so that they can insert their own and have that become the default, the normal. And at that stage, we've assimilated into their system. We've lost our own stories. We've lost our own connection. And through that, we've lost our own authority. So hold on to those stories about our Indigenous identities, no matter who you are, Māori, even Pākehā. You look back far enough, you know, I have some interesting Welsh whakapapa that I'm learning about. There are beautiful Indigenous stories that help to connect us with Papatūānuku, no matter where you look. So hold on to that, e hoa ma, and let's get off this tangent and move on to some actual content, eh?
Ka pai. So let's go back to 2005.
Ka pai.
So this was the racist time to strike. New Zealand First has just tried to put through the deletion of the Treaty Principles Bill. It didn't work. Then they put it in their supply and confidence agreement with Labour. It got through to Select Committee, just like the Treaty Principles Bill today. And then it got discarded.
Mm-hmm.
But months later, something very interesting happened. Something that no one that I've seen has mentioned. The Treaty Principles Bill got put forward by the ACT Party's Rodney Hyde in 2005. Almost identical to today's Treaty Principles Bill. Look at that, back in 2005, Treaty of Waitangi Principles Bill.
So it's slightly different. But
very slightly.
That's the kind of thing with all of these things though, right? These are old policies, but they've been refining their wording on this. And it's the same with New Zealand First, deletion bill, which was just way too overt, way too obvious. And so here we've got, what we have found, is the earliest iteration of this Treaty Principles Bill. And right here, you can see their interpretation of the 3 articles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And I know that some will say that there's 4 articles of Te Tiriti. We're not going to get into that discussion, ka pai. So here, Article 1, there can only be one government. It's the
same as
the current. Article 2, it's about property rights, whereas which is the English drafts, it whittles everything down to property. Tino rangatiratanga is not something that you can grasp within the colonial system. Tino rangatiratanga and that top level authority can't simply mean your authority under a colonial system. Tino rangatiratanga is absolute. So whittling it down to just simply being an authority that you have under another authority, it's just a.
And this one, for me, this is the most important. This one and they all do the same thing. They all strip Māori sovereignty away from Te Tiriti. But this one, it's like what we were talking about, because private property rights is like the god of colonizers. And the way that I think about colonization is actually the changing over of communal property rights into private property rights. I actually see colonization like that, because all Indigenous peoples around the world held on to land communally. There was no concept of I just own this square and you own that square. That just was not existent here in Aotearoa before colonization, right? And so the process of colonization is changing that over. And this happened even, in England before they started colonizing other people. They colonized their own people. If you look up the history of enclosures, they were going around changing land from what they called the commons, which was, owned by the people, into private property land. And they did the exact same thing that they did here. They were like, oh, that's wasteland. You guys aren't using that forest. It now belongs to the crown and we're going to sell it to private property. So they colonized their own people first once they ran out of land, because once you divvy out land to individuals, it runs out. It's just a logical thing. There's not enough land to give everyone massive pieces of land like they do with farming and stuff like that. So eventually they ran out of land, and that prompted them to seek lands elsewhere. They started taking them and setting up garrisons and setting up farms. And actually that's where the word colony comes from. It comes from retired Roman soldiers who set up in the places that they've conquered and set up farms there. And that's where the word colony comes from. Basically it used to mean farm. So it's all about protecting private property rights. And if they say private property rights are supreme, that means Māori cannot exercise tino rangatiratanga, because tino rangatiratanga, as you were saying, is a completely different system to private property rights. It requires having full authority above any private individual's authority. It's about communal authority. It's about hapu sovereignty, right? So for them, if they just say it's all about property rights, then for them, they are erasing te tiriti o Waitangi. And basically, they're just circling back around to the original anti-te tiriti movement, which just wanted the English draft to be the only one that's recognized, because this original Treaty Principles Bill looks very similar to the English draft. Today's Treaty Principles Bill, especially before the latest edition that they put about the hapu, looks very similar to the English draft. But I just want to note, it's even more greedy. This Treaty Principles Bill, and even today's Treaty Principles Bill, is worse than the English draft. Like, it's just, they're so incredibly greedy. So back to that document, the third one, again, same as this one, all citizens have the same rights. So Treaty Principles Bill, almost identical to the current Treaty Principles Bill in 2005, put forward by Act, and it got voted down. But it's not new, fam. It's not new. We've had the Treaty Principles Bill. We've had New Zealand First try to delete the Treaty Principles from law since 2005. So no, David Seymour did not come up with this genius bill. No, he's not some incredible political actor. You can call it the Rodney Hyde bill, in fact. Although we did see somewhere that it was a private bill, and private bill means some private citizen put it forward and it got picked up by a member of parliament. So we don't know who that private citizen is, but I'm going to call it the Rodney Hyde bill from now on. It's not the David Seymour bill. And again, I just want to reiterate that it is our journalists' jobs to tell us that, to tell us the history of this goddamn bill, to tell us, actually, this bill is a reincarnation of the 2005 Act Party bill. It's nothing to do with David Seymour. He's just the latest puppet of the anti-tiriti movement to put this bill forward. And it helps National and New Zealand First progress their agenda if we are just putting everything on David Seymour. This is clearly a united agenda that they've been trying to push for a long time. It cannot be pinned to David Seymour. It can't even be pinned to just the Act Party, because as you can see, New Zealand First tried to do a very similar thing. And as we'll argue, National are themselves doing a very, very similar thing with the fast track and removal of the Māori wards and Māori health authority. So all of them are united on gutting te tiriti. This is not a David Seymour thing. I think I've hammered that point enough.
Kia ora. Thank you. So that's the origin of the Treaty Principles Bill. This old school policy that's come from about 2005. So we're trying to add context right now for the kind of energy that we're all bringing into Waitangi. Right, so lots of things have happened since 2005 and now. A little while after 2005, 2007 was UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. we didn't sign up to that until 2010, which is quite a funny thing. It was one of the last things that John Key, national government, decided to do as he was leaving government. He was handing over to Bill English. It's one of the last things that John Key decided to do. I'm not saying that I like John Key or the National Party, but it's did he sign on to it because he wanted to look good? Did he sign on to it because he knew that some people would think that it's going too far or to trigger some kind of negative response, or who knows? But what else happened since then? Mātiki Mai, the report Mātiki Mai, which was a survey done throughout Aotearoa. I think the biggest kind of survey that has ever taken place, where we've tracked and surveyed what the aspirations are of te iwi Māori. And the aspiration was, hey, we want constitutional transformation. The biggest survey ever done, tying us to some tangible goals that we're aiming for come around 2040. It's a beautiful report. It has models in there of alternative systems of government. It was driven a lot by, rangatahi were a big part of it, and of course kuia and kaumātua as well, but it's the rangatahi aspect is really strong there, which is why I think it's so visionary and so aspirational, which is a beautiful thing.
And this Mātiki Mai really had the colonizers shook. And you see, and excuse my ableist language here, you see Winston Peters. I've heard him say before, and you've got all these activists who think our constitution is retarded and they want to change our country's constitution. They're terrified of the constitutional discussion. That's why we're seeing this war on Te Tiriti right now, because they're scared about the trajectory that Mātiki Mai made very clear to the country that Māori were on, which is constitutional transformation. Really, really shook them.
So, there are other things like that. We've been setting some goals by 2040. Like Te Pāti Māori has some quite ambitious goals. He Puapua, for example, came out. That really freaked people out. Even Labour was a bit cagey with He Puapua. And He Puapua was a report done by a working group in relation to us signing up to UNDRIP.
Which John Key did.
We signed up to it, and then it's like, okay, we've signed up to it. How do we now honor our obligations, or how do we start to do what we signed up to? So then this working group put together He Puapua just as a discussion document, not policy, but that really freaked people out as well. And Labour was even a little bit cagey about it, which was an interesting thing.
Which doesn't help, when you see National NACTNZ first and they do outrageous, controversial things, they back themselves. They back themselves and they say, nah, this is what's going to happen, deal with it. Labour needed a bit of that energy. He Puapua, yeah, so what? Of course we're doing He Puapua. This is what we signed up to. John Key signed us up to. Shane Jones should get over it. You know what? I need some of that energy from Labour, but instead they were like, oh yeah, we might be doing this little new thing, and it just, when you show weakness like that, bullies just pounce on you. That's just how it works. It's just the reality of the situation.
Okay, so He Puapua came out, and then there was a lot of stuff in the news about co-governance. Right?
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And that I hear from a lot of our old people is that co-governance was never a word that we used, right? Co-governance and partnership and these kinds of things, those kinds of things imply some type of, I don't know how to put it, but it's bad for us to perceive it as Māori having authority over others. We want to have authority over ourselves. We want to have our freedom to govern our own lives and to determine our own destinies. That's what we want. We don't necessarily want power over other people. But these co-governance arrangements and, the wording and the language and how some people have talked about it implies that Māori are going to have power over others. And, if we're talking honestly, if the power was rebalanced, yes, the Crown would need to share some stuff. Yes, they wouldn't have full access to all of our resources here in Aotearoa. Yes, they wouldn't be able to just do whatever the hell they want. They would have to do some consultations. they would have to do some talking,
It's
you know, they would have to be like in a relationship. And for me, that's kind of what it is. It's a relationship rather than a partnership. And I guess they're both the same thing and getting very semantical right now.
you know, it's that whole thing of this came from the principles. This came from the very original fact of them watering down Te Tiriti o Waitangi to be about principles. And the principles are what talked about partnership. And so that led the Crown down this path of, okay, we can have a few Māori on some governance boards, and that will be fulfilling our obligations to Te Tiriti. So ultimately, co-governance was also a watering down of Te Tiriti, because Te Tiriti was never just about having a few Māori within a colonial board to govern the water infrastructure or whatever. It was meant to be them having their own thing, and then, as you say, this sovereign nation and this sovereign nation, they will have to communicate, like Mātiki Mai says, two spheres, and then there's the sphere in the middle where they communicate. But co-governance was like, the Crown was like, no, we don't want to give you full sovereignty. We'll just put a few board members here and there. So it was a watering down, but it also provided a weakness in the philosophical argument, because it's not Te Tiriti. And they were able to come out and say, Te Tiriti says nothing about partnership. It says nothing about co-governance. They're right about that. You know what I mean? But it's like what we said before, they manipulate these truthisms and twist them into lies. And so the co-governance thing is still the Crown not wanting to allow Māori to exercise sovereignty. And I think when you go halfway to things, it opens weak spots. It opens the attack lines for people, because it's an incomplete story. When it's an incomplete story, they can attack. And that's exactly what happened. They pointed out the fallacies and the issues with co-governance and ran an entire campaign on it.
Yeah, not telling the full story. Hey,
Exactly.
it's like that simple. If you don't tell the full story, then it's going to fall apart. And the Crown, the government, has not told the truth about Māori sovereignty since the very beginning. And because they've never told the truth, haven't done the hard work of educating the public of what Te Tiriti o Waitangi is actually about, because it's not in their best interest to do that, it's created ambiguities, it's created contradictions and grey areas. And yeah, it's kind of like what happens when you tell a lie, and then you just have to start you have to keep lying, you have to maintain that lie, and it all just falls apart. So, you know, I guess we're abolitionists, right? And we're like, hey, let's just be upfront about it. Let's give everybody the full story and be truthful, and then we can just manage it all together. But, you know, I guess things don't really work like that in the real world, and that's what the politicians will tell me anyway, right?
And where did that strategy get us, Labour? Like, honestly, we are doing so bad in every single shape, way, or form. Like, not to be too downbuzz about it, but this strategy of being nice to the racists, this strategy of being incremental, it's got us nowhere. It's got us nowhere.
Oh, and it definitely got Labour nowhere. Like the last election, you know, trying to placate the capitalists without putting in capital gains tax, trying to be friends with the farmers, giving them reductions in the ETS, not charging them for emissions. Like, they just tried to please everyone.
They gave $10 billion of unnecessary money in the wage subsidy to rich people. That's the unnecessary. That's on top of what people needed. $10 billion were not needed, and they went to businesses and rich people. And Labour refused to claw that back, because they had an opportunity afterwards to be like, okay, we're going to ask for money back from businesses who didn't need it. They outright refused to do it. Where did that get you guys? Because those capitalists turned on you. They didn't give a shit that you gave them billions of dollars. So how about not giving them that? How about actually caring about the people? And then you might actually win.
Hopefully there's some long game strategy that we're not privy to. No, I mean, people, you know, look to the minor parties. You know, if you are stuck in that blue red switch, I really encourage you to look outside of that. The minor parties really do have a lot for us. Big supporter of Te Pāti Māori and also of Te Pāti Kakariki. And I actually have a bit of sympathy for the top party, the Opportunities Party as well. I think they've got some good stuff. But don't be shy. You know, if your parents voted for the blue or the red, your grandparents probably the same. Don't be afraid to be different.
Like, we have a real opportunity in this country. You know, you look at the United States. They don't have a choice. They have to do Democrats or Republicans, they're trying real hard to get the Green Party past a certain threshold, and they're finding it so hard. Like, we are so lucky here with MMP that we actually have the opportunity to have a Greens majority government, and that could revolutionize this country. Like, if there's one thing I want to achieve with the stream, is just to put that idea out there that we can have a Greens Māori majority government that's supported by Labour, and why not give it a try? You know, like, for so long everyone's been like, oh, they mismanaged the economy. The Greens don't know about the economy. Like, I don't know where that myth came from, but it exists.
Myth for sure.
And, you know, oh, we're scared. Okay, I get it. But we've tried Labour National, Labour National, Labour National, and it's been bad, 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 bad. Like, let's just try something different. Let's give it a go. What's there to lose, you know, at this stage?
Okay, so back on our trajectory, all right? People talking about co-governance. That's when... Well, COVID was happening around that period as well. COVID was happening. The activist movements were being ripped apart because of the disagreements that people were having in that space.
Yeah.
Very interesting time, very difficult time. A lot of tensions, a lot of drama, a lot of division. And
the right wing fed on that division. They fed on that, and they provided space for people who were left out by the leftist space. And they gave them a place to go and feel welcome, and they just thrived on it, and they grew while we struggled on the left, and that was their moment. And they did a lot of work during the COVID years. They set up a lot of alternative media platforms, and yeah, they just came together, they found their narratives, and they ran with them.
Well, so yeah, it's a high division time. Lots of people clashing. Three Waters happened during that time. And the co-governance arrangement of Three Waters was that I believe there's going to be 50-50 in terms of their governance structure. There's going to be 50% appointed, I think, by the government or some type of local body entity, and then 50% were going to be elected by, I suppose, the iwi or the hapu of that respective area. But, you know, in terms of that co-governance arrangement, you know, that's not co-designing that system. You know, it's already a colonial system, colonial structure, a crown structure, and then we're getting some seats at the table.
But sorry, there was one extra step. That board was then going to go and elect
the actual
for Three Waters. So it's not even 50-50 Māori governance.
Not of the managing, board, but they were the governance who then
were the ones who picked them. So yeah, just a few steps removed from so many steps removed from Māori sovereignty. It wasn't actually about our waterways either. It was just about water infrastructure. It was just about managing the pipes of this country. And they've decided that this was a good opportunity to latch on to this policy and push their racist narrative. The reason for that is because there's been a long held kōrero that's being had about Māori actually owning the water, which is one of the biggest things that terrifies the settlers and the racists and the colonizers. Because like we talked about before, it would place limits on what they can do, on what they can extract, and how they can pollute the environment. So there was already this idea existing in the anxious settlers' minds that Māori want the water. So as soon as Three Waters happened and Labour mixed it with this idea of co-governance, they decided this is the perfect opportunity for us to pounce and put all the energy around this kaupapa to try and organize a political movement.
This is when people will remember the farmers group Groundswell. This is when Groundswell came out, and you would have seen in the media a lot of the farmers and their placards had incredibly racist images because there is a very they're scared of Māori sovereignty. You know, they were saying stop ramming te reo Māori down our throats and all that stuff, like just weirdly racist placards for this like farming thing. Hands off of our water, things like that. You know, Māori are coming for our water, things like that.
But it was really, really championed by just a small group of anti-tiriti activists like Hobson's Pledge, New Zealand Centre for Political Research, the Free Speech Union, and the Taxpayers Union. Actually, the Taxpayers Union, Jordan Williams, it was found out later that he set up the Groundswell website. So it's not like this giant explosion naturally. These guys were really like let's push this idea out there and let's convince the country that this big, horrible, scary thing is happening because of Māori. And that's what they did. And actually, there is a clip from the Taxpayers Union where they admit, more or less, they admit that they took this, in their words, obscure issue of three waters and created a political movement around it. And that's actually what helped them elect New Zealand, National New Zealand First and Act.
So we've got a little clip here. I'll just play this one.
What we were so successful in doing last time is we made an obscure political issue about water reform, three waters, into the biggest political issue in the local body elections. And we ended up with a result where we had a majority of councillors elected and a majority of mayors who were staunchly opposed to the Three Waters reforms. And we need to do the same with the Resource Management Act reforms.
So this is a secret recording of a taxpayer union meeting, and what they're saying there is they're admitting we created a whole lot of energy around something that wasn't really anything, just an obscure little water pipe thing. And we need to do it again for the Resource Management Act. And they did. And, you know, what he's talking about there with the councils being stacked with their people, they really did that. They really did. They got organized, and, you know, like people like Democracy Now! and all those other democracy groups, they done an amazing job at getting their racists stacked all over the councils. There's no better place to see that than Kaipara. Look at what they did to Kaipara. And it was that strategy of using an issue to build momentum and get their people elected. They started it with the councils, and then they used the same exact strategy to elect the current government.
And you know what? They really used people's racism. Like farmers have their fear around, you know, they want to hold on to their private property rights and things like that. They were able to hook into that energy around people's racism and to bring those people on board for actually a different kaupapa. Like Three Waters, my understanding is that a lot of people were worried about local assets going to central government. And this is something that not a lot of people really cared about. You know, and a lot of people do care about it, but it's kind of one of those things, you know, it was very economics heavy. It's like, how do we pay for water infrastructure? This is a potential way to do it. So instead of having that argument around the economics and how to fix failing water infrastructure in Aotearoa, instead of having that argument, they just decided to hook into people's racism. They were like, okay, this is a co-governance thing. Okay, that means it's a Māori thing. The Māoris are going to come in and get it. It's a Māori radical takeover, you know, at the same time as when Julian Batchelor came about. But, you know, the Kaipara Council, for example, Craig Jepson, I remember when there were things going around, like, you know, when you see it in the mail where the people put in their little ad for their mayoralty. And his one was just about co-governance, just about anti-co-governance. Literally, he said nothing else in his little advert about himself. He didn't give anything else, just anti-co-governance energy. So this anti-co-governance energy, anti-Māori energy really captured people.
Yeah, and because it gave them an issue to talk about, it meant that they weren't talking about all the other issues. And so these people weren't saying, oh yeah, my policy is to screw you guys over and help all my mates to build their retirement villages or whatever it was that Kaipara's up to now. All sorts of corrupt shit. They're not telling people this. They don't have to, because there's just this one issue that they've built a lot of interest around, and people's they sort of their fear was activated, and so they weren't able to think rationally.
And just look at these pieces of this art, right? What do we call this? These scribbles is terrible.
Like almost Nazi level propaganda that Nanaia Mahuta was subjected to. Click on that whale one. I mean, look at that. We recognize that comparing humans to animals is actually almost genocidal, or it can be genocidal, like we've seen in Palestine and also in historical genocides. This is so problematic. And then go back to the page to show how many. Look at what they did to Nanaia Mahuta. I mean, honestly, it makes me really genuinely upset, and I'm sorry that that we're showing these to you. But this needs to be talked about, and it didn't get talked about at the time, okay? Where was our media calling out this horrific dehumanization that was happening of Nanaia? Because what they used 3 waters and then they tied it to a face because it helps to have the enemy. It helps to have a face. So they got 3 waters. That was the issue. Then they put it on Nanaia's face. And because Māori women in a settler colonial society, they're already preloaded with a lot of racist assumptions because of mainstream narratives. And so it didn't take much for them to take Nanaia's face, to take the fears around Māori owning water and mix them together into one horrific, disgusting cesspool of racism and misogyny. It didn't get called out by the media. You saw the media at times, they were like, oh no, Jacinda Ardern is facing sexism. True, she was. You know, we live in a sexist society, so like, of course. But look at that. That is so much worse than what Jacinda faced. So much worse. And it reflects that Māori women are actually among the lowest socioeconomically in this country, among the most oppressed demographic in this country. Māori women are the most incarcerated Indigenous women in the world.
So it's insane statistic.
This is reflective of that. The media didn't do anything about it, and Labour didn't do anything about it. Labour didn't do anything about it. Not only, they didn't stand up for Nanaia, okay? They didn't back up their minister. Worse than that, they bloody demoted her. They demoted her. Like, what a slap in the face. Like, no upholding the dignity of your own minister. How can you ever trust Labour after that again? Can you tell I don't like Labour? Because, yeah, like, this really upset me. Like,
don't like National either? Always got to say that. You always have to say it.
And it's like, I actually hold myself responsible as well. Like, we all should have done more at this time. For
absolutely.
And I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry, Nanaia. I'm sorry to Nanaia Mahuta's whānau that we all failed you during that time, because that should not have been acceptable. And that guy, Tremaine, who was doing those cartoons, for a while he was getting published in one of the main newspapers. I can't remember, it was the Herald or the Post or something.
One of them, yep.
It took them a long time before they were like, oh yeah, we're going to stop showing his racist. I mean, you have to laugh because it's genuinely upsetting.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then another thing about the media.
Yeah.
That we can mention.
Show that. The media didn't help with this. Not only did they not call out the racism, but when it comes to 3 waters, they didn't dispel the notion that it was stealing people's water, that assets were being sold off. They didn't dispel. Actually, even worse, okay? So the absolute worst thing that people, the worst misconception that people had about 3 waters is that it was taking the water away, right? Those are the signs that you saw in Groundswell. Māori are taking the water away from us, and it's not your water, it's ours, that kind of stuff, right? Even though this was about water infrastructure. It wasn't about governance of waterways. It had nothing to do with fresh water. It was about governance of water pipes. Okay?
Yeah, and so, you know, the farming sector here in Aotearoa is, they say it's the backbone of the economy, even though they're like $40 billion in debt, just the, you know, dairy industry alone. They need water. The reason why Aotearoa is great for farming is because we have an abundance of water. Our climate is really great. We can grow grass fantastically, you know. And so water, it's a resource that they use that they don't have to pay for. It's just a complete, and they externalize their harms as well. Typical extractivist colonial industry. They don't pay for this pure resource that they extract, and then what they leave us with is, you know, the runoff of nutrients, nitrates, or just feces and urine from the cattle themselves. And so who owns water has been a huge conversation. In terms of our rights under Te Tiriti, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear under Te Tiriti, our taonga. What could be more of a taonga than our ancestral waterways? And so there is a huge legal argument.
And it's recognised in Te Tiriti and the English draft that Māori have rights over their water.
Forestries, fisheries, I think is
Taonga.
Fisheries, I think, is what you'll find in the English one. And I suppose, you know, fisheries, yeah, fishing for tuna in your local river and stream. But there is a solid argument there in terms of Māori's customary rights when it comes to water here in Aotearoa. And John Key famously said, he was asked the question, who owns the water? That's a classic question that we don't really hear anymore. It used to be the reporters that go around, who owns the water? And John Key was like, no one owns the water. And, people like that, especially Pākehā, especially farmers, no one. And it's a nice sentiment, right? How can you own anything? And I'll just say, from a Te Ao Māori perspective, I don't think we own the waterways. I think we have kaitiakitanga responsibilities to the waterways. And I think Debbie Ngarewa Paka said it nicely as well. It's not that we have privileges or benefits, we have responsibilities. I really do believe we do. I think Indigenous peoples, when you're living off the land especially, you do have a responsibility to look after that space. But anyway, there's a huge legal argument for Māori in terms of what happens to the waterways. Okay, so that's the backdrop of what we're talking about. People being anxious about Māori rights when it comes to water.
And so the racist groups that we talked about, they put forward this idea that Three Waters was somehow going to give the waterways to Māori. Completely untrue, but they put that thought in people's brains, right? Yeah. So instead of dispelling it, look at what News Hub told people. And I actually laid a broadcasting standards complaint about this, which wasn't upheld like a lot of my complaints that I've made.
And sorry to Craig Nickelroy for that unflattering shot. You're a handsome man. I'm very sorry about that.
Kilometre replacement program.
The Labor government's solution to the water woes like this is the plan formerly known as Three Waters, now dubbed
Affordable Water Reform.
And here's a reminder of what they are. The latest iteration creates 10 new entities with boards. Those will be appointed by groups which have a 50-50 split of council representatives and Māori. Those boards will run all the freshwater, wastewater and stormwater around the country.
You catch that?
News to me.
Run the freshwater in this country. That's
bad.
Running all the waterways in this country. That's what they're saying this 50-50 appointed board is going to do. An outright lie. Not only is it an outright lie, it feeds into the racist narrative that Groundswell had been putting out that this bill was going to give the freshwater rights to Māori. I complained about this. They were like, yeah, it was a mistake. But then they didn't uphold my complaint. I think on the article they put a correction. But as you can see, the video still has it. And I don't see how it would have been a mistake because someone had to make that graphic. Someone else had to put the graphic in the video. An editor had to finalize everything. I find it very hard to believe, but even if it was a mistake, they should have in exactly the same format, just like the regulations say, they should have gone on the news and corrected themselves out. We apologize. Yesterday we said fresh water was going to be given away through the Three Waters bill. So yeah, the news didn't help. If anything, they perpetuated these racist ideas.
Yeah, so the media, oh man, we all love the media, hey. And apologies if you hear a random dunk or something like that. It's like when we touch the table. So apologies for that. But yeah, the media really being unhelpful. The government not telling the full picture, right? The government not telling the truth and giving us the full story. And then whether it's on purpose or a genuine mistake, who knows? But the media really failing to inform us adequately about what's actually going on, which is really unfortunate.
Kapai.
And sorry for showing you my notes just then. Faux pas number what?
Bound to happen.
Okay, so next, what have we got?
So they built up all this racist energy, and this was used by National Act and New Zealand First to run their campaigns. And New Zealand First decided, oh, it's time for us to bring back our Treaty of Waitangi Principles deletion bill because we feel a lot of racism in the air. And they feed on that. We want those votes. We want this energy because we want to be able to pass this bill that we've been trying to pass since 2005. So watch this clip. You're going to see someone very familiar.
Familiar. I'm glad we have this clip. Eh? It was a hard one to find. This one's going to be good for the archives, this one. Here we go. Our old friend.
He says that co-governance with Māori is the same as the brutal South African apartheid regime.
And with no handbrake, they're ramming it down your throats.
Bay of Islands lodge owner Julian Batchelor had some of his land reclassified as Māori land and says Pākehā are being oppressed.
I have personally had some. I've been on the other end of apartheid.
Do you agree?
Sure.
Of course I do.
Sure, Julian.
My whole speech was about that. Which part did you miss?
Batchelor also put up policies on removing almost all references to the Treaty of Waitangi from legislation. Shane Jones in favour of the idea.
With the exception where it would be unwise of us to unwind things such as the Ngaitahu settlement.
And making English an official language to stop it being erased. Is English really being erased?
Well, it is. I mean, look on TV, on the TV news, and on other places. English is being replaced by Te Reo.
By Te Reo.
It would tick another
the
box.
giggling, hey, he can't even keep a straight face as he's saying that because he knows it's ridiculous. But so what we've got here, Julian Batchelor at a New Zealand First conference
In 2022.
And the media is portraying this. Oh, and Julian Batchelor has brought forward
a members bill.
This bill, which removes references to Te Tiriti o Waitangi from legislation. But it's said almost as if this is something new. Like that this is the guy who has put this forward or come up with this. There's no background information, no context given that actually this is a policy that New Zealand First has been pursuing for a very long time. It was a policy that Winston Peters himself put forward. Why is he not the person now to put it forward? Why has he given it to Julian Batchelor for him to champion it? I'll never know, but the lack of context that the media gives us, I suppose, is the point that we have here. And it's just...
Yeah, so in 2022, 18 years after the first time they tried to pass it in law, they pinned this Treaty of Waitangi Principles Deletion Bill on Julian Batchelor for some reason. So Julian Batchelor has strong ties to New Zealand First. We also know that he's had some connection with Shane Jones as well on a private basis. So these guys, there's the most racist guy in the country, Julian Batchelor, is effectively our deputy prime minister because he aligns with New Zealand First. So we can't see Julian Batchelor as some sort of extreme outlier. He is our government. He represents what our government represents. So yeah, and they brought it back in 2022, and now National has said that they will conduct this review. So they're not calling it a deletion bill anymore. They're just calling it Treaty of Waitangi Principles Review. But we know where this review is going to go. We know why. Because of the whakapapa of this bill. It literally used to be called the Treaty of Waitangi Principles Deletion Bill. There's no way in hell that they're just reviewing it for fun. They're reviewing them to remove them from legislation. It would be very, very good if when we talked about what they're doing with these bills to understand that this actually started a long time ago.
Okay. So we're moving on a bit now, I think. And so during this time, lots of racist figures were coming out, all of this bullshit narrative around co-governance, how it's some type of tribal takeover or whatever. Te Pāti Māori was also gaining momentum during that time because, of course, you know, when you have that end of the spectrum rise, you get a reaction on the other as well. But I think it's been a global rise for Indigenous groups. It's not just a spike for Te Pāti Māori. Globally, I feel Indigenous peoples have been in some type of state of resurgence and re-indigenization in the last few years. Globally, I suppose it's something that we've kind of woken up to. We're not really anything unique or special here in Aotearoa, but moving on from then, I struggle to pinpoint when National really made their kind of racist kind of line in the sand.
Because they had Judith Collins, right?
Yeah, she was all about the separatist language, quite similar to Winston Peters in the way that she talked. But we have this clip here, and you think that this ties National to where they've drawn their line in the sand. We'll bring it up. For
me, this was a really telling moment because this was so back to the King's coronation, and when Meka Whaitiri left Labour to join Te Pāti Māori. And Te Pāti Māori did this whole thing during the King's coronation. They interrupted the ending of the King's coronation to do their ritual to move Meka Whaitiri over to their side of the house. And National decided this is a perfect opportunity for us to signal our racist values to the country because they came out and they said they came and they disrespected the King's coronation, our king.
She's paraphrasing.
Not really. And yeah, so he called out to New Zealanders and was like, if you support the king, if you support the crown, if you support colonization and colonial culture, and you believe, and you are racist towards Māori, you believe that Māori culture has no place in Parliament, we are the party for you. So they captured that moment. And the words that they use, I'll play a little bit of the clip and then I'll talk about the choice of words.
And a vote for Te Pāti Māori is a vote for a coalition of chaos, as I keep saying, and more economic mismanagement. And we need serious, stable government. And the only way to deal with that is to party vote national, so that we can actually get the economy in place so that we can actually go forward.
So the turning point for you has actually been about a political strategy and grouping them together.
The turning point for me has been watching an absolute perverse set of behaviours over a number of weeks now that have been focused on personnel and politics. And I'm interested in solving problems and getting things done. And I want everyone to be sober-minded and clear-minded about the challenge that New Zealand has ahead of it.
So the language and the framing that they were using around that time with chaos, and they pinned this specifically to Te Pāti Māori. They were like, a vote for Te Pāti Māori is a vote for a coalition of chaos, because they're going to take everyone down with them. They're going to take Labour down with them. And where this is coming from is actually a really old school colonial narrative that Indigenous people and also the Indigenous environment represent chaos, whereas colonialism represents order and control. And, he uses the word stable. So stable, civilized versus chaotic and all over the place. And so this is the image they were using. And you see, he said perverse set of behaviors.
Very strong word.
Very strong word. And perverse, again, is it's connected to this idea of the Indigenous savage, It's they're chaotic, they're perverse, they're like, and that's the image that they were putting through, and they were contrasting that with this image of civility. We always wear suits. We're not like Rawiri with his kicks, And so for me, this was a really telling point. I was like, oh yeah, they're going to go hard on the racism after this. And that's exactly what happened. Past that point, they were like, I guess, reading their internal polls, and they were like, oh, that's sold. Bashing on Te Pāti Māori and using them actually as just a representation of Māori more generally. Like, that's the racist aspect about it. They often say Te Pāti Māori, but they're trying to send a racist message about Māori more generally.
And it's old school playbook. Like, people will remember Don Brash. He went hard on the racist strategy, and he got in. He got slung. If people saw the intro video, maybe I should play it again. And he had mud slung at him, and actually that was when he rose in popularity. And it's what the colonizer tries to do. They want us to lash out. They want us to lash out so that we are perceived as that group that can't have that rational debate. And we'll get more into that soon, because that's a lot, in terms of how the media portrays Waitangi, they really do portray us in that kind of way, that we're unable to have that kind of debate and discussion. But we'll say more about that later. In terms of Luxon signaling that he didn't want to work with Te Pāti Māori, it wasn't just Luxon. Yeah. During that time, and Te Pāti Māori was starting to gain momentum, we saw, what should we call them? Establishment Māori, or more Labour Māori. People who work with the system, I suppose. And there's real legitimacy in working with the system. We need good people. We need good people on the inside, working on the inside. But at the same time, we need people pushing for that alternative, pushing for the bigger picture, the more aspirational vision.
At that time, just quickly, something else that I noticed is everyone came out hard against Meka Whaitiri. Like, everyone. I've never seen such a coordinated mainstream media attack on any politician to that level before. And like, we've seen them do it to heaps of, especially wahine Māori and other brown women. But for Meka Whaitiri, there was a unity. Like she'd committed the ultimate sin to leave one of the establishment parties and go to a radical Te Pāti Māori, is always portrayed as the extreme and radical one. So that seems like the ultimate sin, because not only was she doing that, she was also sending a message to Māori. She was explicitly saying, I was hamstrung by Labour. That's a really dangerous message because they rely, I believe, the establishment relies on Māori voting for Labour because it keeps everything in that centre safe space where National's happy to pick it up from Labour, you know what I mean? So they really came down hard on Meka Whaitiri. And yeah, I noticed that, you know, some of the Māori presenters did as well.
Let's have a look at this one from Oreni Kaipara.
So, starting with Rawiri, Oreni, you picked up on something that he said that Meka was coming home.
Yeah, I've been watching this week, obviously, for good reason. What strikes me is the whole phrase, well, a lot strikes me, but saying she's come home. In my idea, I thought she's always been home. Ikaroa Rāwhiti is her home. To say that she's gone from Labour to the Māori Party and that's home, I'm kind of a bit confused about that. Like, are they telling us that Labour wasn't actually the place for her, although she spent 10 years prior to becoming an MP with Parikura Horomia? I thought that was her home. So I'm a little bit confused about the message or the underlying messages that aren't being said, on that front. So I'm confused. What is home? Because home as a Māori is where your people are, where your roots are, and they've always been for her in Te Tai Rāwhiti.
Well, it...
Oh, there's more. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, just wanted to hear that part.
That's right.
Because they, you know, and they went on to try and paint this image with the other presenters. By the way, the panel, that guy used to be a Labour guy, a Labour president or something like that. And then that woman used to be the New Zealand First president. So you can see...
member. She's a current New Zealand. That's Jenny Maycroft.
I thought she used to be a president at one stage.
Potentially. She is a current sitting MP for New Zealand First. I know that.
Right, okay. So New Zealand First and Labour, they all came out hard against Meka Whaitiri, and so did Oreni. And I was really like, I guess like that's my naivety for expecting anything from her. And I don't know anything about this woman, but she came down really hard against Meka Whaitiri. And then at the end of that clip, again, Oreni came down hard against Te Pāti Māori more generally. She was like, I don't understand Rawiri's argument that they want to be, you know, in the middle and holding government to account because like we've got parties for that. And I assume she means Labour. But yeah, she was like taking away from all the energy that Te Pāti Māori was building. And I saw that in a few places.
Yeah, she wasn't just, I mean, you know, she was saying as if Meka Whaitiri had abandoned her people, essentially. She was saying as if she had left them. And I think that energy, a lot of Māori might express that because for a lot of us, it is difficult working with the system. And we have to grit our teeth and we have to put our head down and we have to do what we can, even though we might want to say the radical thing. We might want to be more aspirational. A lot of us have been punished for pursuing things in that way, or we've been perceived, you know, it's been twisted, you know, to say that we're greedy or whatever, or that we're radical, we're going too far. So I think that, you know, Oreni, I mean, she's a mainstream media presenter, right? Must be very hard for her being her full Māori self in such a space. And Meka Whaitiri was saying the same thing, that she couldn't be her genuine, full Māori self in the Labour Party. And so, you know, for her, as she said, it was she was emancipated through being able to unshackle herself from the Labour Party to be her true self.
Memory.
So for me, I would say, you know, she never left her people is the main thing. But also she was on a new path of, I would say, speaking more genuinely to the real aspirations of how our people feel. And of course, the vote didn't turn out in her favor.
No thanks to the media, you know, they just like, it was such a intense like campaign. Like I remember at the time, and we made a video about it, but Jenna Lynch was like likening it to war, and she was likening Meka Whaitiri to some kind of like a threat.
Yeah, there was all these war analogies. Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah, so they created a lot of negative energy around Meka. And yeah, Te Pāti Māori in general, the mainstream media hates them. And like, look at this next clip that we've got here. It's another example of
the lack of faith, or
yeah. Well, this one's just a funny one.
Not willing to allow the more radical groups to gain the momentum that I think they deserve.
Yeah, they
So let's
definitely
put this
weren't helping to get them elected, you know. But yeah, this is a funny one. This one's
Based on what we've seen tonight,
Morgan
who's
Godfrey?
going to win?
Morgan Godfrey and there, sorry, a bit of context there. They just had the Te Taitonga debate.
Yeah.
And the whanaunga, Julian, he's going to pose the
bring
question.
enough kind of passion for them to actually go and do it. I mean, it's more convenient to vote now, but just hopefully that will be a thing for them.
Based on what we've seen tonight, who's going to win Te Taitonga, Morgan?
Oh, Rino's going to win. Of course Rino's going to win.
And why do you say that?
There's a history there because Rino's been the MP for 12 years.
And of course, Rino Tirikatene, he was dethroned by Takuta, Takuta Ferris. And so, you know, you saw the confidence from Morgan there. Oh, and look at that. Our camera's going to die. So I think I have to jump quickly into just a little intermission.
Oh, all right. Oh, yep.
We've been going for like an hour and 45 minutes now. So I think, E Hoa, if you want to just take a quick little break, maybe get a drink of water, just need to change the battery on our camera.
Probably be like 1 minute, to be honest. We'll be right back. At the end, maybe.
Kia ora tātou, we're back.
We're back. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that, technical difficulties.
We'll get it figured out though.
We will figure these things out and we will definitely streamline this kind of thing. We'll just give it a couple seconds just for those who are going to want to rejoin.
Kapa. So where were we?
Where were we? We were talking about how the whole world is against Te Pāti Māori.
Yeah.
Especially, so National ruled them out because they could not stand Te Pāti Māori standing in their mana and being staunch, not giving the king the respect that National and their supporters would want an Indigenous person or Indigenous group, Indigenous party to give their big boy colonizer, you know. It was that level.
How dare they?
How dare they? How dare they disrespect the crown? How dare they? So
yeah,
National had that energy, and I think from everyone else, we saw it from the media, from Ordini, from Morgan Godfrey, a lot of groups who were like, you guys are taking it too far. And there was another guy, I forget his name, we don't have the clip, but he also questioned Rawiri and saying, hey, maybe you need to temper your language a bit. Maybe you would be more successful if you tempered your language.
Yeah, they're often portrayed as extreme, and you know, I think with this change of government, like at least I'm hoping we get a little bit less of that, because now hopefully people can see like what we're working up against. Te Pāti Māori aren't exaggerating when they say this government is on an extermination agenda, and we can see that. We can see that with everything that they're doing. So hopefully, and I, you know, even from an anecdotal personal experience, I think more people used to give us that feedback. Oh, you're a little bit too extreme. But since then, since seeing this government, I've had a few people sort of say to me that I used to think you guys were too extreme and over the top, but now I see what we're working with, and you're right. This country is really racist. Like, this government is really, really anti-Māori. So hopefully people have a little bit more faith in Te Pāti Māori, but I think I'm being a bit naive.
I think when Julian Batchelor came out and when Craig Jepson came out, these overtly racist individuals, and now they're seeing Shane Jones and Winston Peters running with that energy as well. I think people are waking up to it. I think people are realizing that there is an issue here, that there is a real issue here, that we can't keep sweeping it under the rug. I think that's what it was for the racism, for all the racist uncles and stuff, like, oh, let's just ignore him. But now we're seeing that rhetoric literally in central government. They tested it out with Craig Jepson in Kaipara. He did all sorts of things, you know, just unilaterally removing co-governance arrangements, banning karakia, using AI to translate, you know, government documents into te reo Māori.
And insulting ihapera paniora, which, yes, again, like, I come back to this point of, like, there's just such a normalization in this country around insulting and dehumanizing Māori women that it didn't really get called out. You know, he said, how Indigenous are you? And he keeps telling her to shut up in those words. He tells her to shut up all the time. He yells at her. He disrespects her. Like any normal democracy, I don't know, you'd expect the media to be like, hey, this guy's being a bit of an asshole, racist, misogynist, you know, but it's so normalized. It's so normal. And so, yeah, it started off with all of that. And they realized it does work, it does fly, and all those same groups coalesced around this government and got them elected after that.
And really now, that's where we are today, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
So this is the context that we've been trying to build, and apologies for the millions of tangents that we go on, but it's all been ramping up. It really has been.
Since the 1800s.
You know? So we've had the hikoi now. The hikoi was huge.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was uplifting, invigorating, and what an incredible, beautiful example of how we can come together and do something really powerful, really super powerful. And I think for the Crown, that was a very intimidating thing. You know, it went off without a hitch. You know, there was no, I think there was maybe one incident or something like that. I don't think there were any arrests. I didn't hear of any injuries or anything. That was a seamless, beautifully executed example of what happens, you know, what we're capable of. And we could go so much further than the hikoi. You know, we had the haka from Hana in Parliament, Kamate, ripping up Te Pire, the bill. And that, of course, went global, went viral around the world. You know, it's not just here in Aotearoa that Indigenous energy is rising. It's definitely a global thing. And
protests in general. There's been, you know, it's been a year of protests because of the genocide. We've had weekly protests up and down the country from the very top to the very bottom, and all the small towns, they've come out every single week. Again, doesn't get covered by the media, but there's been a lot of protest energy about anyway that's been generating ever since, yeah, I'd say Julian Batchelor. Because the thing that Julian Batchelor did that I think is hilarious is because he was going around trying to organize his own people across the whole country, right? But there's a flip side to that, because every single place that he visited, he also helped to organize the resistance movement there. And so it was kind of like a resistance tour, you know, he was doing us a favor, I think, going around the country. Everyone in each city started forming their own anti-racist crew just to respond to Julian Batchelor. Or maybe they already had anti-racist crews and they were becoming more motivated.
Yep.
So yes, they have been awful and pushing hard, but there is a positive flip side to that, which is when they push hard, we become motivated as a movement.
So, are we here now? Have we arrived? Have we given enough context for what is leading us up to this trip to Waitangi this year?
Yeah.
Let's talk about what happened last year. Okay?
So not yet.
Not yet. No, we're pretty much here, whānau. We just wanted to give some context around how we've arrived in this current climate of racism here in Aotearoa, and how important te tiriti is, and how important our tino rangatiratanga is, and how real it is in achieving some tangible, beautiful changes. You know, there is a beautiful, peaceful revolution that is possible within this alternative system that could be led by Māori sovereignty. So let's go over what happened last year, okay? Probably the best way to prepare everybody for this coming Waitangi is to look at what happened last year, okay? And of course, like we said, lots of stuff happened, lots of things happen at Waitangi, but we're just going to focus on the political activations that took place, okay? So last year, there wasn't just the hikoi, and I'm not talking about the toitu te tiriti hikoi. There's a hikoi that happens every year at Waitangi. People come down from Rerenga Wairua, Cape Reinga to Waitangi, and you know it's connected with the Land March. It's just a tikanga of Waitangi to have this hikoi, and it's a beautiful thing because having that practice every year of that hikoi that takes place at Waitangi, that had everybody ready for the then nationwide hikoi. So that will be taking place. That happened last year. Tameiti had his display. I'm not sure if he'd call it an activation, but he had his, let's call it an activation.
It was like an art performance. Yeah.
A bit more artistic, a bit more somber. The idea of, they waved white flags. And for me, I was a bit like, is this like a surrender party going on?
No.
But the idea behind it, my understanding was that it was a blank slate. You know, it wasn't the Timor flag or a New Zealand flag. It was a white flag for us to come together and to envision a new nation together, which I think is a beautiful thing. But then also the Toitu activation happened during the political pōwhiri. So there are 3 different types of activations that took place last year. And I think they're all great. They all went off without a hitch.
And that's, of course, beyond just the general political and resistance nature of Waitangi. You know, a lot of
course, there's so many things
happening just
it's
constantly.
all inherently political.
You know, there were people standing up, facing politicians, and giving it to them in the forum tents. You know, that's a great opportunity to be able to have that, or even Annette Sykes standing up and even just calling out iwi leaders in the room and stuff like that. So it's a powerful space.
Okay, so let's have a look at how the media framed Waitangi last year.
Yeah.
And this part should be a bit more fun. We've got some videos to pull up.
We're almost at the end, whānau.
Almost.
Yeah, so we want to talk about a little bit about media framing of Waitangi. And this is like what I always say in my videos. It's not that these things that they portray didn't happen. It's about what they choose from the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage to portray, and about how they frame the footage.
Come on, let's get into it.
Behold the mana of Ngāpuhi.
I mean, come on, like obviously that.
Should we play it again?
Yeah,
Should we play it again?
Play it again.
Lynch reports they weren't disappointed.
Behold the mana of Ngāpuhi.
Like,
there's a lot of kaha there.
Of course, it was an incredible haka. Always, kapa haka is always incredible and always has a lot of mana, right? But of all the images in the world that they could have picked to say, behold the mana of Ngāpuhi, they picked their backsides, and I do not think that that was accidental. Like, they could have shown the haka, but they could have shown their faces with all the mana that their faces hold, right? And in Te Ao Māori, your head holds a lot of mana, right?
Of course,
You know?
of course, te upoko.
But they chose to show their butts and to say, behold. You know, when you say behold.
You can't show butts and say behold.
I mean, for me, that was a deliberate move. And there were so many different examples of mana happening at Waitangi. Like, the whole thing was oozing with mana. And I mean, I'd love to hear their argument back to me. This is what they thought best represented the mana of Ngāpuhi, of all the things that happened that day.
And I just want to say, there's a lot of mana here from these kaihaka. Definitely a lot of mana. And I think they did a really great job in terms of the pōwhiri here. But I agree. Showing the backsides here when speaking about the mana of Ngāpuhi, there are many other examples they could have played here.
And it's the first clip, right?
This is just our first little bit of evidence, whānau. Ka pai.
Of Ngāpuhi. The guardians of Te Tiriti leading the crown onto a packed pai upon the sacred Waitangi Treaty grounds, inviting them to engage in the discussion they've been asking for, a debate on the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi.
Prime Minister, this is a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day to have the discussions. It's a beautiful day to have the robust debate.
Robust was an understatement.
To strip the treaty of its mana, to belittle the reo by trying to make it a second-class language in our land, it ain't gonna happen.
Hone Harawira was the first to fire up the gathered crowd.
And you want to cut the treaty in front of all of these people? Hell no!
Telling David Seymour in particular where to go.
So when it comes time to see where this is going to go into legislation, you and your shitty ass bill are going down the toilet.
His speech spurred a group of protesters to march onto the pai.
Hey, it's me. So what Jenna just said, she's just making an assumption here. So we were there on the day, and we know how much coordination was required for what happened here. And she's just said that Hone's speech spurred on this activation. But it was not just spurred on as if it was some random thing that's just happened out of the blue. There was a lot of coordination that took place there.
And I think, you know, we're going to see this as a running theme throughout this video clip. When they're unsure of shit, they just make it up. Like, you know, Jenna Lynch and this News Hub people feel entitled to Māori culture to a point where they feel like there's no problem with them just making up stuff where they have gaps. Instead of investigating, instead of asking one of these demonstrators, no, they don't care, they don't give time. They just make shit up, and apparently no repercussions. So, and I just want to say about someone who put a comment, I agree that showing that Māori are going to hold on to their culture no matter what the colonizer thinks is a good idea. I just think the framing of it being the very, very first clip that they showed, along with the words, behold the mana of Ngāpuhi. Like if they had said, behold the mana of Ngāpuhi, then they showed their faces, and then the next shot was their butts, I wouldn't have seen anything. It's not the fact that their butts were out that I'm worried with. It's just, it's just the framing and what choice of clip to show people as the very first clip to stick in people's minds.
Yeah, like just think about it. They could have shown some fierce pukana. They could have shown waka going out on the water. They could have shown, there is a whole, you know, that's the subtle, it's the subtleties, you know, and there's a lot of things in terms of Jenna's language. Sometimes you might even see parts in the story where you think, oh, I think she said that nicely, or oh, she gave a point there, but it's the subtle things that they slip in that are really the problem. So it's a theme, it's a theme.
Remember, they're talking to racists as well, so that they are trying to send a certain message that aligns with a pre-existing story that Māori are the other, that Māori are inferior, that their culture is inferior, instead of portraying the culture as something honourable and beautiful that it is.
Kia ora, kia ora. So that comment, and we were just responding to Big Who's, I think it is. So kia ora for your statement. Appreciate that.
Holding signs saying Toitu Te Tiriti, honour the treaty. When it came time for the government to respond, the song sheets could not have been more different. Shane Jones honoured with a haka.
Shane Jones honoured with a haka, she says. So she's saying that Shane Jones has been honoured with a haka. This is not true. It was a pre-arranged haka. But the message from her is that there are Māori who support Shane Jones. So much so that these people were willing to just do an impromptu haka for him. But my understanding is that this is when Shane was handing over the koha, and this was essentially the end of the government's kai kōrero slots for this part of the pōwhiri. And I wouldn't be surprised if the haka here was arranged. And so we'll play a clip showing
we've got
the actual pōwhiri. And here we can see Shane Jones. He it's almost like a renter haka, really. You know what I mean? Aroha mai, technical difficulties. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, I'm going to have to find the exact time.
Oh.
Maybe sing them a song, Samah.
Well, it's just interesting because not only was this not an impromptu haka to honour Shane Jones, like Jenna Lynch said, but there's actually like quite a bit of faux pas. It was actually quite embarrassing for Shane Jones because so this pre-organised haka was meant to take place at this time, and he tried to he tried to summon them. He tried to be like, Timata, whatever. He tried to start the haka.
Here we go.
And it didn't work.
Oh no, look at these technical difficulties. Here we go. Tries to tell them to jump and they're like, matua.
So to be clear, he had said the first line of their haka, hoping they would jump straight into the response, but their kaya just repeated the intro line because they don't work for him.
And then not only that, but he gives another faux pas here where he thought the haka was finished.
Kati.
Oh, so Kati is what he said. He thought the haka was over. So he's not even on the same page as these kai haka. He's not even on the same page as what they're doing.
Yeah.
But
it was awkward after that.
But Jenna has portrayed him as, he's one of the people. He's one of the kai haka. He's even the kaya of their ropu. That's how in touch he is with te iwi Māori.
Why didn't you join the International Court of Justice like South Africa and say, ceasefire now?
So this was an incredible speech. Annette gave an incredible speech that day, right? And she's facing the government and she gives it to them. She really gives it to them. And she also talks about the genocide of Gaza. Of course, I didn't include her mentioning the word genocide. But it's interesting that they chose to include this clip. And you'll see what we mean when we finish watching the whole thing. They actually don't include any real, rational arguments against the Treaty Principles Bill. They show anger, and then they include this random clip from Annette talking about Gaza, which is completely out of place. Like, she didn't introduce it. She didn't say other topics were touched on as well. They just kind of included a little snippet from her, almost to say, see, we've included your very highly respected wahine toa, Annette Sykes, so you should be happy. But actually what they included was something that didn't fit along with their storyline, which was there was a robust debate meant to be happening about the Treaty Principles Bill. What they ended up showing you, we saw Harawira's great parts of his speech, but again, those weren't the parts of his speech where he was offering actual critical feedback on the bill. And so throughout this entire clip, they didn't include a single sentence or a single part of anyone's speech that actually spoke to the logical reasons of why the Treaty Principles Bill doesn't work. And it's like said it in her very speech. Like, they could have just included more parts of her speech. I don't know if we've got it, but...
Yeah, we've got a small clip here. So it's all about context of what they pick, right? They could have picked a million parts. We just listened to a little bit of Annette's full speech. We didn't have heaps of time to pull anything up, but I thought this was a really great part of her speech. They could have highlighted something like this instead of taking it to Palestine and making it sound like, you know, they were all over the place and talk about all sorts of issues and don't have our discussion ready in regards to the actual kaupapa.
Not better rights, different rights, protection of our property rights that the capitalists amongst you are thinking about every day, consuming with the avarice that feeds the baubles of your coffers. If we look at how much money was donated to each of these parties in the last election.
So apologies if it's not enough to give you context of what she's fully saying, but she's essentially calling out the rich list of backers, you know, that are really behind all of these things, behind New Zealand First, behind ACT Party, and behind National as well.
And therefore behind the anti-te tiriti agenda that they have. And she explains this in her speech, you know, like why these capitalists are afraid of te tiriti. These are incredible arguments that could have been included, but instead they just put this out of place Reza comment. I don't know. Obviously, like we're huge fans of the fact that she mentioned Reza. Like I was so happy. I cheered so loud, and we all said Free Palestine. It was amazing. But just, yeah, why they chose to include that and not her other parts about the Treaty Principles Bill.
Come on, let's get back into it.
Acts Nicole McKee-Awaiata.
Acts Nicole McKee-Awaiata. So Jenna Lynch has just said, you know, that Shane received a haka. And Nicole gets a waiata. But actually, this waiata was sung for Nicole McKee, who is an ACT Party member, right? She was there speaking. There was a waiata that was sung by our wahine to shut down her kōrero. You know, she had been speaking for long enough. Her kōrero was not that great, and the wahine had determined, Pāti, that's enough. So they decided to sing her out. I can't remember who said it first, but there was some story about how they were singing in support of what she was doing. I think it came from David Seymour. I think David Seymour said that.
And Jenna Lynch is just running with that narrative. Fun fact, Jenna Lynch is married or is partners with the ACT Party Chief of Staff. So, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really take much to put two and two together there, but they take the narrative from the ACT Party. The ACT Party said, no, they were honouring her with that, and they just ran with it. Like, they could have just asked one of these wahine. They could have asked someone like Hilda, who was there, and she ended up making a post about it, or we're not quite there yet.
No, we're there. So some people in the media said that it was to support her. Some people said that it was to shut her down, and there was a bit of confusion. So Nicole McKee decided to go on the platform to clear things up. Here's what she said.
So the woman that was singing to try and drown him out. This is what I've been told.
Yeah.
I was not stopped in my speech. I actually went through my entire speech. And when my colleagues came up behind me, they came up behind me to help sing the waiata. So it was always planned that they were going to come up behind me to do that. But when I finished, when I actually concluded, then a lot more Ngāpuhi women stood up and continued to sing. And I was told that singing was to total or to me, that they were actually proud that I had broken the barriers and created something new. What was reported by...
So she went out and she said, oh, the media, and I'm not sure who she's talking about. She's obviously not talking about Jenna Lynch. She's saying the media said it was to drown me out, but actually it was to support me.
Yeah, so she says it was to support her. But of course, I knew that wasn't true, and I saw a post from Hilda, via Hilda. She put this one out on Facebook, and I'll just read it out for you. It's a bit hard to see. I'll just read. It's the third paragraph. Let's be very clear. The woman of Te Tai Tokiro sang ngā puawai o Ngāpuhi to close down the ACT speaker's speech. They weren't endorsing MP McKee's kōrero at all.
Well, there you go.
So, you know, maybe we're laboring these points and going a little bit too much into detail, but just the discussion and the point is that Jenna Lynch has framed it as Nicole receiving this waiata as some type of sign of support. So it's the subtleties, e hoa mā, the subtleties that they try to slip in to confuse us with.
So yeah, Jenna's trying to paint this idea that Shane Jones was honoured, Nicole McKee was honoured. She's trying to say most people were honoured except for, and then she tells you about Winston Peters.
But when Winston Peters took the mic, the spirit shifted.
This is very, very brief because...
And we'll just say, the spirit had already shifted. Like, there were already clashes and disagreements before this took place. But I will say that, yes, there was somewhat of a shift.
Because he was being a dick.
He came in guns blazing. We were all insulted because Winston came in and he was just like, I have other arrangements that I have to go to, so this will be brief. But we'll play the clip.
Winston Peters took the mic, the spirit shifted.
This is very, very brief because we have another appointment with a number of ambassadors from overseas who've come all the way to this country to advantage our economy and our relationship internationally, and they're important.
He let rip.
Whoever said we're getting rid of the Treaty of Waitangi? Tell me.
He let rip. What a badass.
Yeah, so and you see she keeps going with this narrative. She's really trying to make it out like he put us in our place.
No, we didn't.
Can we go back a sec?
Like he put us in our place, like the naughty Maoris that we are.
Yeah.
You know?
And she really relished in this. Like, watch how much she just let it play out until she finishes with him. And watch just how much she relishes and how much time they give him, basically not saying anything helpful to help the audience understand.
And our relationship internationally, and they're important.
He let rip.
Whoever said we're getting rid of the Treaty of Waitangi? Tell me. No, we didn't. You tell me whoever said we're getting rid of the Treaty of Waitangi. So stop the crap. Stop the nonsense. Stop the hysteria.
He did not pull a single punch.
But if you think separatism and division is going to take us to 2040, you're dreaming. And I'm telling you, let me tell you, sunshine, I used to go to the marae where they had a thing called tikanga and protocol and respect, and not you shouting. See what I mean?
Love it. He's like, not you shouting.
It's such a stupid.
Like, you know, decorum and manners and things like, you know, these are things the colonizers love. If you can't say it, you know, I mean, language. Like, never mind that you're stealing our land. Never mind that you're trying to erase our culture and our rights, but have manners.
Yeah.
You know?
And she loved it. Oh, he's not pulling any punches. He read it rip, you know. It's like, that wasn't a punch. He's being stupid. He sounds like an idiot.
Mm.
But she loves it. They put the naughty Māoris in their place.
Mm.
See? Get an education. Get some manners. You got plenty of time.
As soon as he said manners, you can hear the whole crowd go, oh. Like, come on. This is the most rudest politician. Maybe Shane Jones can take it off him, but one of the most rudest politicians
ill-mannered
in the parliament.
Trash, to be honest.
You had all these people speaking here. You see what I mean?
I thought it was.
I have no respect for Winston Peters. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Zero.
You had all these people.
He hates my people.
Yeah. No,
hates
it's
my
fair.
people.
No, it's fair. It's fair.
He hates immigrants. He hates Palestinians. He hates.
Oh, it's fair. And I mean, you know, this guy supports Julian Batchelor. You know, he's happy to drag us through the mud. You know, and I know a lot of our people support New Zealand First, Winston Peters. But, you know, I'm hoping we've given some insights into why that perspective might need to be reassessed. I mean, you know, I've spoken to I won't say a lot, I've spoken to some of my friends, and I've explained to them about New Zealand First and how Julian Batchelor has that connection with them and how they're trying to remove 28 references to Te Tiriti from legislation. And then they say, no, that's the ACT Party.
Yeah, I mean,
no,
some
that's
people
David.
just don't believe us.
Yeah.
And it's like look at that, 2005. Deletion of the Treaty of Waitangi Principles Bill that put forward by Winston Peters.
Anyway, you know, aroha mai for anyone who thinks we're being disrespectful to this kaumātua. But for me, he's dragged us through the mud. And even if he's got some grand vision, you know, oh yeah, drag Māori through the mud and we'll try and get some kind of gains for our people and they'll be grateful afterwards. Like, if you drag us through the mud like that, when you diminish our mana in the way that New Zealand First has done, for me, the respect, if it's not out the window, is very close to being out the window.
He's too kind.
People speaking here. You see what I mean?
I thought it was combative. And once you get and start using provocative language and you start off with an uppercut, you're eventually going to get one back.
Peter's
So
unapologetic.
Can you pause that? So that's an interesting thing, right? What he just said. He said, once Winston Peters, he started with an uppercut, he got one back. But they didn't show us the uppercut that Winston Peters got from the crowd. So another massive omission from the News Hub team, because they were trying to. Can you find that?
Yeah,
video?
I've got it read, because so what they're like, it's as if they didn't want to show Winston
being humiliated.
Yeah, or
they wanted to put the image that he was humiliating us.
yeah, he was giving it to us, but really the way that interaction ended,
Completely different.
and I'll try and pull it up. Where are we? Here we are.
You had people speaking here. You see what I mean? All of you had a chance to talk, but here he is. All right, okay. Well, that's not the way it's going to be in 2040. It's not the way it's going to be in 2040. So ladies and gentlemen,
So old boy, he got shouted out. He got disrespected, to be honest. Like, when I look and when I think about the aftermath of what happened here, I think Shane Jones was offended for Winston because he saw Winston be disrespected in this way, and I think for Shane in that moment he was like, oh wow, okay, we've like actually upset a lot of our people to the point where they're going to allow this kaumātua to be shouted down.
Yeah.
On a marae
It takes
Aotea.
a lot. It takes a lot for Māori to show that level of, just as an outsider's opinion, Māori communities are so incredibly tolerant and respectful, especially to kaumātua. So much so that these people, New Zealand First, has been abusing the kindness of your hearts for way too long. It pisses me off. And yeah, I think there was a realization for them at that moment that there is a line, and he had crossed it. Because he was insulting Eru Kapakingi at that moment as well when he said get an education, someone who's extremely educated, of course, a lawyer. But yeah, so, you know, there is a limit. There's a limit to how much disrespect you can show. I hope they're reaching it.
Fair.
Ka pai.
Ka pai. Back to Jenna's report on Waitangi.
Never talking was accepted, but when we were talking, it's not.
Unsurprising to his closest colleagues.
Why would anyone be surprised about Winston's delivery? I'm not.
David Seymour, the man who many had come to protest, followed Peter's path.
And I say to Te Pāti Māori, if you want to have a battle of ideas, then it helps to come armed for that battle.
He was
Okay, so, you know.
Like what we just said about Annette.
Yeah.
And how they chose not to show her criticising the bill.
Or anyone offering critiques, logical arguments, substantive arguments against the Treaty Principles Bill. They didn't include any of that. And then they included David Seymour saying, oh, if you want to have a good argument, then you better come with some actual points. Because, and I feel that the framing of this entire video clip is that Māori came with an antagonistic, chaotic energy, whereas the civilized colonial representatives, they came with sober arguments, you know, and even
manners.
With manners, you know, unless Winston Peters, he was playing a role putting the naughty Māoris in their place, of course, but David Seymour, he is represented as this rational statesman who's able to come up and speak calmly and give the arguments, but they didn't show that the other side did that as well as protest.
He was insulted by the language used.
Oh, insulted, replay.
For that battle.
He was insulted by the language used.
Today I've heard people say that we are spiders on this side, that we are sandflies. Well, I'm sorry to say, folks, not even Donald Trump is calling his opponents insects yet.
Man, if we were to take this guy literally, like his words literally, you know, these references of being sandflies and of being spiders, you know, it's a very normal thing in Te Ao Māori, I would say, to liken various things to kararehe, to animals, to the traits of animals, because they have, it's a way of talking, it's a way of speaking, it's a figurative way of speaking. But this guy, David Seymour, he has said so many things figuratively that if we were to take literally, it's just worlds worse than calling someone a sandfly or a spider, you know. He's talked about having fantasies of blowing up the Ministry of Pacific Peoples, things like that.
All the ministries, apparently. Apparently, he went up and down the country making jokes about blowing up these ministries. This is his words. He was like, I made this joke hundreds of times. You know, he's called gang members and their whānau. He referred to them and their behavior as subhuman. That's extremely well-known Nazi terminology. So, you know, it's that whole colonizers have a monopoly on violence. Colonizers have a monopoly on rudeness as well. They're allowed to be rude like Winston Peters, right? But they're offended if we use the wrong language. And so just that setup of that whole thing. Extremely, and one other thing. We were also very insulted, right, by a lot of things that they said. Like, and if we're going to stick to this language thing, Annette Sykes, in her speech, she speaks about being insulted by David Seymour calling Māori unwashed or something to that effect. And she speaks about that. She's like, excuse me, actually, I do wash. I wash every day. It might be cold water, but I wash. And so, you know, they could have included that. Well, actually, Māori were insulted by the language of the colonizer, but no, they didn't, because it doesn't fit the framing.
He's really leaning into the statesman energy here, eh?
Yeah.
He's the guy with manners, and he's come with a debate and da-da-da-da-da. The statesman energy.
Others insulted by his actions, drowning him out with a waiata.
Its own future. Newsflash, you don't.
Singing Sit Down and Listen.
I got news for you. There's people up and down the country watching you, and they're asking, why do those people have a right to stop the rest of New Zealand debating its own future? Newsflash, you don't. One of the bad.
And of course, they included what David just said, right? He's saying we don't have arguments, we're just there to shout him down, we have nothing coherent, etc., etc. They chose that clip. They chose to play that clip. It fits perfectly with the narrative of this story.
A lot of demeaning stuff about Māori has been included in this clip. You know, all of Winston Peters' stuff was extremely demeaning. Oh, I'll tell you what tikonga's really like on a marae, and all the shit that he was saying, cultural appropriation and trying to diminish from the mana of people in the room. And then David Seymour, again, they included a lot of that stuff uncritically.
Things that could come out of their behaviour. Debating its own future. Newsflash, you don't. One of the bad things that could come out of their behaviour is for the rest of New Zealand to see their behaviour as representing all Māori. It most certainly does not.
There's a lot to say about that little quote. I'm going to replay it for everybody, just because I feel like we go on so much when it comes to these things. So I'm just going to replay his phrase, and then we'll speak
Flash,
to it.
you don't. One of the bad things that could come out of their behaviour is for the rest of New Zealand to see their behaviour as representing all Māori. It most certainly does not.
I thought
His members liked that little comment.
So I'll just say from me, again, he's giving that kind of statesman energy. He's giving that energy of, oh, you know, I really worry about how people perceive Māori, you know, in their best interests. I really worry about that. So he's trying to come off as a kind type of person. But additionally, the actions, the activation, I thought it was a beautiful action. I thought it was amazing action. And I thought it was a very tika, very just way for us to respond. And I think it was a very normal way to respond as well. I think it was necessary for us to respond in this way. And he's trying to frame it as a rude, he's trying to frame it as a, how would you put it?
I think, you know, it's extremely racist, what he just said, and extremely colonial and loaded. Because what he's saying is that this is not the right way to be Māori. He is some sort of arbiter of what it takes to be Māori. So, you know, he's coming out and he's saying this behavior that we just saw was bad. That's the subtext of him saying we don't want people to think this is what Māori is, okay? And then to say if people were to believe that this is Māori culture, that would be negative. And of course we know this is Māori culture, and so the implication of what he's saying is that Māori culture is bad. You know what I mean? Because he's saying if people are to think this is Māori, they would think negatively of Māori. But this is Māori.
I would say it's very normal how we behaved that day.
She even said, behold the mana of Ngāpuhi, right? So she set the clip being like, this represents Ngāpuhi. So for him to say, oh, if anyone was to take this behavior that we saw on Ngāpuhi land as being representative of Māori, that would be a negative thing, because that is not how to be Māori. You should assimilate and act like a settler. Otherwise, you're behaving wrong. So it's extremely racist. Doesn't get called out for, of course.
I thought it was very unfair. Yeah, and we should have done more. It's my apologies to them both. And for Nicole, for that matter, for not shutting that down earlier to give them the space and the time to articulate themselves clearly.
No, but that's a very interesting thing that he just said. He said, yes, I want to apologize to them, as in David Seymour and Winston Peters, and Nicole. And it's like, why would he be apologizing to Nicole if, as Jenna Lynch said, they were singing to support her? You know, it just, it flies in the face of the argument that she made just earlier in the clip.
Before anything boiled over, a call for calm.
Boiled over.
Aroha, aroha, aroha.
The Prime Minister changed the government's tune, waiting patiently to step up to the maho and recite his scripted vision for the future.
Unity doesn't mean all of us being or thinking exactly the same. We can value our differences. We can debate them constructively while respecting each other and still find a...
I just want to say on that comment about boiling over, it's like, poor things got violent, but things were never going to get any more intense than us singing that song about whakarongo e noho. That was the plan, that we went in to sing that song to him. There was never any black plan beyond that. The only thing, she stood up and said aroha, 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 because she didn't want us to interrupt Luxon, and we agreed to that, and we didn't interrupt Luxon. It wasn't to stop things from bloody boiling over. Like, trying to make out like there was some threat of violence going on.
Always.
Pathway towards a better future together.
Great speech, Luxon.
On that, perhaps everyone agrees. Judging by today, the pages don't even seem to be in the same book.
So, they didn't include much from Luxon, but they definitely were like, oh, he's the reasonable dude. Everyone agreed with him. He gave a great speech. But what they didn't include, and again, have to rely on the just members of the public. Thank you, Spiderhoof. Shout out to the amazing work that you do. They investigated Luxon's speech, compared it with the year before, and look what they found.
Today, and 7 decades after Cook sailed south from Tahiti,
he repeated
Crown
his
representatives
speeches.
and Māori came together to sign the Treaty of Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. 183 years ago, Cook sailed south from and 7 decades after Cook sailed south from Tahiti, Crown and Māori came here to sign the Treaty of Waitangi. And we know that they likely had different understandings of what they were doing. And we know that in the years that followed, the promise and the...
So in Jenna's story, from my perspective, they kind of portrayed him as
The reasonable fella.
the reasonable guy, the reasonable fella. But really what he is he's a hollow, incredibly hollow, shallow fella, to the point where he had to copy paste his speech from last year.
Yeah, I mean, watch that whole video if you have time, because seriously, it's quite. Oh, kia ora from Lebanon. Welcome.
Kia ora, Fruit Tasty.
He copied his speech. Like, there's giant sections that are just copy pasted between the years. It's hilarious.
And now Luxon's not even coming to Waitangi this year.
He's like, oh, well, I'm gonna have to write a new speech. Never mind.
Yeah, he couldn't be bothered writing a fresh speech, and he didn't want to be criticized for copy pasting again. So he's just straight up not coming this time, which I'm all good with. We got someone who's beaming in from Lebanon. Awesome, Tenakwe, and to Ronnie McDonald.
Man, that person should be blocked.
There's only been one troll in this live stream. That's quite impressive. We'll see how things progress in the future, though. Eh?
Kapai. So he copies his speech. We don't need to see the rest of that.
Kapai. Back to Jenna's. We're almost there, Whānau. Almost there.
Well, Jenna joins us now. Kia ora, Jenna. Whew. So did the government walk away from here having eased any of the tension with Māori?
Well, that's certainly what they've been saying the goal was. David Seymour and Winston Peters at least addressed the tension, but perhaps did more to inflame it than diffuse it. Christopher Luxon just didn't even go near it. It seemed at times as though the leaders were talking past the people gathered here at Waitangi to their own support bases at home. A lot of the unease is around the Treaty Principles Bill, David Seymour's plan to redefine the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. Christopher Luxon didn't even mention it in his speech today, but when questioned about it afterwards, we did for the first time hear him come close to acknowledging the bill was creating division for no reason, because ultimately National is going to throw it on the scrap heap once it has fulfilled its coalition commitment to act to support it to first reading. There is so much water to go under the bridge still. This bill hasn't even been drafted yet, and given the depth of feeling that we've seen here at Waitangi.
Enough from Jenna. Just a quick point here that and something that I've noticed ever since the conversation began, the media has fed into this idea that it's just the Treaty Principles Bill and just the ACT Party that we need to fear. When again, it's their job to be like, yeah, this act is bad. There's a lot of resistance to it. They're also putting forward this act, which would do the same thing, and this act, which would do the same bill, which would do the same thing. But they're not. They just fed into this idea, oh yeah, it's all about the Treaty Principles Bill. It's all about ACT. And I think that narrative benefits them because it upholds the dignity of National as being a reasonable guy, even though, as we've explained throughout the stream, National has been in lockstep with all of these moves all along.
Yeah, David Seymour, the ACT Party, they're definitely the fall guy. Maybe New Zealand First as well. They're there to take the heat off of National Party. They're the ones currently, to the highest degree, breaching Te Tiriti. But the heat is on the minor parties. Something wrong with that equation right there.
Yeah, and, you know, take us back there. The Treaty Principles Bill takes out, redefines the treaty principles, right? And it's, as you said, it's just to provide the narrative around what National's already doing.
The justification's like, oh, it's not so racist what National is doing, because look at what that other guy is saying. He's really bad.
Yeah, and with National and where was it before? The list. Can we have a look at the list of the things that New Zealand First wants to repeal today? With their,
okay.
So, you know, for example, just to prove the point that ACT is a fall guy for this coalition government in general, there was so much pushback against the removal of 7AA from Oranga Tamariki Act, as there should be. That's horrific. We're playing with children's lives here and putting them on the pathway towards institutionalization and stealing them from their community. It's awful. So it got a lot of rightful resistance, okay? But that was just one act, okay? They wanted to remove the treaty principles from that one act. Take a look at the list there for the New Zealand First revamping of the Treaty Principles Deletion Bill from 2005. They want to review all of these, and look at that. The Oranga Tamariki Act is in that. So they want to review / remove or delete, I should use their words. They want to remove the reference to the treaty principles from the Oranga Tamariki Act, as well as 27 other laws. So while we were rightly giving all of our feedback to the ACT Party and their forewoman in that case,
Karen Shaw,
the New Zealand First is progressing silently behind the scenes and a bill that would remove that reference from the Oranga Tamariki Act anyway. So they've been playing us. Oh, Mr. 8% is controlling the government. Oh, poor Luxon doesn't have control over little old Seymour. It's complete bullshit. They're ripping apart the treaty, and they're all on lockstep over that. Okay, just some fun bonus videos now.
So that's the end of Jenna's report. What else do we want to say about Waitangi?
Just wanted to say that Seymour, like, you know, with the omissions thing, they omitted that Winston Peters got heckled off stage, okay, and like they omit all of our protests. So almost all protests get omitted as in erased from the media. They don't show us. So we've had, like I said before, a year of consistent weekly protests across the whole country. Very, 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 very little coverage of the Palestine protests, but Palestine protesters were present even at Waitangi. Take a look at this.
Is Marika in here?
There's Jenna.
Seymour, supporter of genocide. This man hasn't even got respect for international law. Supporter of genocide. Shame on you, Seymour!
Sorry, I know it's loud.
So, you know, there's just a couple of funny things on there. Like, okay, they omitted that. They didn't bring it into the news, right? That he had heckled. And actually, they were facing that all over Waitangi. This energy was everywhere. Okay, so they didn't capture that. But you see Jenna Lynch. She's following him around like his little puppy dog. It's freaking hilarious. Like, she's not interested in what's happening around her. She's just hyper-focused on the, you know, representative of the person that her husband works for, you know? So it's hilarious, but she was there. She saw that little interaction happened, but didn't get reported on. It's not interesting because she just made out like he was a respectful statesman, as you said.
Yes, a respectful statesman doesn't get heckled by a variety of groups, you know. Maybe she was willing to show him get heckled by Tiwi Māori, but an additional group that's going to heckle him as well. There's you know, he's getting hit by multiple sides. That's not something they wanted to show.
Absolutely. And then bonus footage. I think this is hilarious and so embarrassing. Like, honestly, New Zealand journalists who done this, all of your faces, I don't know who you are other than like Jenna Lynch or maybe one other guy. You guys should be embarrassed of yourself, okay? You saw how Jenna Lynch was following Seymour around like a little puppy dog. Watch what they do. So this is right after David Seymour finished his submission. He was the first person to submit. It's almost like they, that part, I mean, democracy,
goes without saying, right? Goes without saying.
He literally came out to the media and he was like, oh, the select committee members can decide whoever they want to speak in whatever order they want. And because members of select committee are proportional to the members of MP that you have in your party, the select committee is stacked with New Zealand First Act and National. So they were able to dominate the choices for the oral submissions. And they put David Seymour, the guy who drafted the bill, as the first speaker. And and I think this is part of the news strategy as well, because the news focused so heavily on him as the first speaker and created a lot of narrative around his speech, gave him even more airtime to voice the same things that we've heard him say a million times. And I think there was a practical element to it as well, because they were able to come in, watch his submission, and then get out of the room really quickly and start drafting their stories instead of staying and waiting for him to submit later on in the day, right? So watch how he finishes his speech and watch how all the journalists just leave. They follow him.
Sorry to interrupt, but we've reached the end of time for our hearing, so I'd like to extend our appreciation for you being here and wish you well for the Thank you very much, and good luck, guys.
Shit day,
Now I'd like to invite to the table the Koho Health and the National Urban Māori Authority. And with us, we have Lady Tudati Moxon.
Decent conversation running. Let's go.
All right. So, and she gives an amazing speech, but instead of respecting her and sitting down to listen, look, they're all leaving.
What do you know?
Look,
Thank you for being with us.
And JT is like making room. Oh, they're media. Look at them go. All of them. He's taking the camera even.
I mean, it's shameful. Shame on you guys.
Kilda.
Yeah, she gave a great speech, but they weren't there to see it because they just came for David Seymour, and then they just followed him like their little pets, and then they did their little media conference outside, and then they created media around it. And actually, I forgot to prepare this, but I was going to show side to side a New Zealand Herald article. David Seymour says, and then it quotes him from his submission and frames the story around his narrative. And then I saw a Guardian article, and it said, an international shame. The Treaty Principles Bill described as a shame to the nation of New Zealand. So for the international media, they framed it around someone calling this bill a national shame, framing it as, the horrific thing that it is. But when it came to New Zealand media, they were like, David Seymour fights against discrimination, more or less. So
we need to do more of those contrasts of international with local media because, the way, often we see our media do it. How did the internationals report on And it's very interesting the way that we're perceived externally. It's just a very interesting. We have to do more comparisons like that. Okay, so I feel like we're in wrapping up mode.
Kampai.
So thanks to everyone for being here. It's been a fun night. We've been having fun just yarning and sharing some of our research with y'all. Let's end with talking about what's coming up this Waitangi, which is just around the corner. What is it? It's in a week's time? Week's time, is it? It's next weekend.
It's in 6 days.
Oh man, and it's not just a weekend, eh? It's no longer Waitangi Day. It's now Waitangi or Waitangi Week, yeah. So one of the cool things that I thought has happened is Ngāti Rehia, the hapu of David Seymour. His I don't know how strong it is, but a link is a link, isn't it? His link to Te Ao Māori is through Ngāti Rehia, a hapu of Ngāpuhi. And the chairman of Ngāti Rehia, Kipa Munro, he decided to send a wero to David Seymour to advise him that his hapu do not support him attending Waitangi this year.
They officially told him not to come. They used the word "we officially."
Did they use official?
Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, it was in a letter, so can't get more official than on paper. And this is pretty unprecedented, I think, of a hapu deciding to extend themselves like this and to involve themselves like this. I think it's a brave move. I love it because I don't think we should be allowing these types of people into our spaces. David Seymour, he has the mainstream media. He has all of his platforms in Parliament. He has all of the funding from his rich listers to get his kōrero out there. He's got all the websites. He's got all of the alternative media groups just lapping it up. He's got Jenna Lynch running around broadcasting his perspectives 24/7. And so what I am trying to say is, why are we letting these people into our spaces who consistently spew their deceptive misinformation, which I think works on some of our people? And I think it's a wise thing for us to do, an appropriate thing for us to do, to safeguard our spaces and our people from harmful rhetoric, because it has real world implications. A lot of the things that we've been talking about tonight have been very subtle messages that are very hard to spot. And it's gonna keep happening if we don't start drawing some lines in the sand. So I'm very, very proud of Ngāti Rehia stepping out like this and making this call. They previously supported David Seymour to attend Waitangi in the past. And so, you know, that manakitanga, that aroha from Ngāti Rehia wanting to support David Seymour previously, the benefits that David Seymour has had through his association with Ngāti Rehia. You know, not only is David Seymour allowed to do all of these racist things and fall back on the, oh, but I'm also Māori, so, you know, it's not that racist. He's had that benefit of being Māori. But not only that, he has had this hapu who has gone out of their way to support him. And of course, you know, people will say, oh, of course, you know, hapu are always going to support a politician because they want to get something in return, blah, blah, blah. But it's just a fact. You know, I saw Ngāti Rehia members stand up to do waiata tautoko with David Seymour, for David Seymour. That's
that camaraderie.
That's a privilege that comes from having that link to Te Ao Māori. And he's abused.
Limits,
there are limits, and he's abused his whakapapa, his toto Māori, just like Jones and Winnie Tana. They're abusing their whakapapa, and it's happening too much. And so, yes, there are arguments for free speech, and yes, there are arguments for let this person in so that the debate can be had and people can decide for themselves. I would support that if it was a good faith discussion. But politicians are trained, you know,
to manipulate.
We're talking about these old bills that they brought up 20 years ago, and they have been refining those bills, the language in those bills, their methods of deception for not just that 20 years, but ever since the signing of Te Tiri, even before, right? These are the people of the forked tongue, right, is what people say. Colonial people, the English people, they have a forked tongue, and they often say the opposite of what they mean. And we've known this for a long time, that politicians are deceptive in this way. So I make the argument that we do need to exclude some people from Waitangi.
And just, like, there's options, right? Like, for example, they don't have to speak. They don't have to be given speaking opportunities, but they can still be invited to just attend, to just sit down and listen. Maybe they need to spend more time listening, for example. So there's the option of inviting them, but just like the letting them speak is what frustrates a lot of us youngins, especially. Because, they get a lot of opportunities to speak. And I would also add to what you said that it is actually like harmful. I find it psychologically harmful, not because like his manipulation is working on me personally, but I find it personally harmful to see someone like insulting Te Ao Māori on a stage like that where they're being respected. I find it psychologically hurtful to see someone like Winston Peters, who I know supports the genocide in Palestine, who I know hates immigrants like myself, who gets up there and just insults Māori from the pai and is invited to speak again. I mean, I obviously have no skin in this game whatsoever, so like I can't, and I would never try to do anything in that space, but just it is actually like psychologically harmful to hear racist people speak at you and to be given positions of respect. So we gave that option in a poll that we conducted, an official all report poll, our very first.
More official than Curia.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, so
and sorry we don't have the graphic. We will get better at this live streaming thing.
Oh yeah.
So that we can pull up things like polls. Oh my, don't show the phone to the camera.
So we gave 3 options, and I'm actually surprised about the answer because, like, for me personally, even though what I just said like sounds like I have a strong opinion, I would have probably voted option 2, be not invited, but be allowed to come as a member of the public, because I think they can just sit down and listen, right? But you guys are more hardcore than me. So we gave 3 options. Option A, be invited to Waitangi. Option B, be not invited and just be able to come. Or option C, be refused entry altogether. And 77% of you voted be refused entry altogether. So can't even step on the grounds. 18% of you said he can just come as a member of the public without a speaking opportunity. And for only 5% of you thought that he should still be invited to give
Who is that 5%? We know who you are, just so you
No.
know. Just so
No
you
judgment
know.
for your vote.
When there are polls, we can see who voted on what, just so y'all know.
Don't say that. It's going to impact the neutrality of our extremely scientific poll.
Extremely scientific, very official. We'll do lots of these polls in the future, and we'll
I love them.
do media press releases.
Like Curia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so vast majority of the country supports David Seymour not being allowed to step foot into Waitangi. Conclusive evidence. You've seen it here tonight, folks.
But just to be transparent, there was about 200 people that voted in that
good.
poll. So, you know, hey, it's not the most representative, but there's a little bit
And
there.
they're all our fans, so.
Okay, so what else is happening at Waitangi? Ne? Ngāti Re here has uninvited David Seymour. Ka pai, that's awesome. There is going to be all sorts of activations. Tamaiti is doing another activation. I'll pull up the program. We can go through it together.
Just quickly reply to someone. Jenna Lynch's partner is the ACT Party Chief of Staff. So, because someone asked, is she tied with National? No. Tied with ACT, so even worse.
Ka pai. All right, so here we've got the map for Waitangi. From my understanding, Tamaiti, he is having his activation at Te Tōu Rangatira. You can see that at the bottom there, Te Tōu Rangatira. And that's from the 4th to the 5th, I believe he said. He's going to set up some type of display there, and people can just come in and interact with it, is my understanding. From the 4th to the 5th, I'm pretty sure is what he said. What else have we got? There's the normal Waitangi hikoi, not the Toi 2 one, but the Waitangi
the yearly hikoi.
Hikoi, which is happening on the 5th. Okay, so most of the activations are happening on the 5th. Okay, if you want to be involved in that hikoi, they're meeting at 7:30. 7:30, whānau.
AM.
Again at Te Pō Rangatira, so the same place as Tamaiti's installation. After that, 10 a.m.
Still the 5th?
10 a.m. There is the Toi 2 activation meeting at the Whare Waka. Give me a moment and I'll pull up the Whare Waka. So the Whare Waka, there we go. So just ask people where the Whare Waka is and they'll point you in the right direction. Probably easiest to find the cafe. And then from there, you can see here on the map, Waka stage area. That's where Ngātuki Matawhaurua is. So they're meeting at 10 a.m. Oh, sorry about that. Faux pas. We're almost there, whānau. Almost there. Again, the Toi 2 activation will
begin at 10, and then they're going to discuss plans of what the activation during the political pōwhiri is going to be.
Thank you, Samah. Thank you.
We're on the edge of our seats. What are we going to do? Are we going to disrupt them? Are we going to play it differently this year? We'll see.
So we don't have any insights into the Toi 2 activation and how it's going to run. But what the Toi 2 organisers have said is we come with the same āhuatanga o te hikoi, the same spirit, the same energy, the same respect, the same mana, the same tikanga as the hikoi. And if you participated in the hikoi, you would have understood what that is. What is it? It's, of course it's non-violent. Of course it is. It goes without saying. But the āhua is that we're holding in our minds everything that has happened since the signing of Te Tiriti. All of the broken promises of the Crown. All of our parcels of land that have been alienated from us. All of our people who have lost their whakapapa lines. All of our people who have been through state care and who are now completely separated from their whakapapa. People who have been assimilated. All of the different pathways to prison and things like that. All of the colonial harms that our people have faced. The harms that our taiao has faced. Our waterways. Our whenua. Our air. Harms against just our ecosystems in general, our kararehe, animals, everyone has been suffering under the system. So to hold those things that are important to us at the forefront of our mind and to act with the intentions that are honorable towards some pathway that can address these injustices, and we do that with our head held high, knowing that we're standing on the shoulders of our tupuna, and that we are working to inspire our future descendants to pursue these same pathways of, wanting to live up to the vision that our tupuna had with Te Tiriti, which was a beautiful vision of unity, of us coming together, living in this beautiful nation together. So bring all of that with you. You know, bring a positive attitude, but also bring that serious focus about what the kaupapa is, that this is for our mokopuna, that this is for what our tupuna have been fighting for since the signing of Te Tiriti. Come with mana. Come with mana. That's the message. What else? Illuminati. Illuminati is playing.
Shout out.
That was one of the best things about last Waitangi for me, was this awesome concert by Illuminati. So they're doing a gig at 6 p.m. on the 5th. So pretty much.
Where?
Oh, okay. So there is a program that's available. If people go to the Waitangi website, try to find it on here. There's a beautiful program here. All of the information that you will need. There's a map. There are free buses every day. I think that's one of the main things about Waitangi this year. They're changing up the parking arrangements, so be mindful of that. But Illuminati, pretty sure they're on the 5th. Can't find it in the program, but
anyway, last year we had a very magical time with Illuminati because they like played in the forum tent where the discussions were happening, and is that what it's called? Anyway, that place where discussions normally happen and not usually concerts, but they did.
At Te Ti Marae, which is kind of more. I don't know if you call it like the backstage place, but it's kind of that's the actual marae of Waitangi, whereas the upper grounds was kind of made just simply for the ceremonies around Waitangi. But at Te Ti is kind of like the OG celebrations, or
the political discussions happen there.
Yeah.
And so Illuminati played there, and it was an impromptu dance party. Everyone moved away the seats, and everyone jumped to their feet and started dancing. And then we saw Tamaitis at the front dancing with us, and it was like, whoa! It was an amazing experience. So glad that they're doing that again.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awesome. Oh, I think that's about us. Hey.
Yeah, I think so. We've definitely talked enough. Thank you to anyone who's been here the whole time.
Oh wow, if you've sat through all of this,
you're a legend.
Mihi atu ki a koe.
Yeah.
We're still figuring things out, as I'm sure people have noticed. But these are the kinds of deep dives that we are keen to do. We so often do a lot of research and nothing happens with it. So we're keen to do this fairly often. A weekly stream would be great, but because we have Wi-Fi issues and we're on solar power, and you know, if it's a grey day, we literally don't have power. So in terms of how regular we might be able to do something like this, not too sure. But we do want to get some kind of schedule going, and we do want to grow this and hopefully grow our capacity to be able to make our content faster. Because there's a lot to talk about. And we want to, you know, we think there's a real gap in terms of platforms that discuss some of these things in this level of depth on the left. So any final words from you, Samah?
Just thank you to everyone who's been here. It's like incredibly humbling that anyone even wants to sit down and listen to me. But I appreciate it so much, and it pushes me to work harder. And just want to leave you with this document right here, because I hope if you maybe you came late to the stream and you didn't see this discussion, which started early on as well, but the Treaty Principles Bill was first put forward by the ACT Party, by Rodney Hyde in 2005, almost identical to the current Treaty Principles Bill. So this is a very long-standing issue. We just need to keep going. We just need to keep resisting. It's not like there's anything new or different happening here. They are just playing the same playbook. So we've just got to focus on our task of resistance. We've got to focus on our movements. And I'm saying this to myself because I find this really hard, but to be less reactionary and to be more vision focused. And so that kind of aligns with what you were saying. You know, it's easy to come and just be angry and yell at David Seymour. That's all I want to do at Waitangi, but I won't, because I know now that it's best to think about the vision that we want and to focus on that instead of reacting to this, what appears to be like this new threat, when really it's just colonization.
Kia ora. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you again, everyone. And if you do want to support our mahi, we have what's called a Ko-fi account, ko-fi.com. And if you search Aotearoa Liberation League, you'll be able to find us. And through there, there's a donate link. People who donate don't get any special perks. all of the content that we create is completely free. We will continue to create this content no matter what, because we think it's really useful. But if you would like to support us, if you'd like to help power us up, help us create our content faster and be more sustainable, then that's there for you. And of course, for everyone who's already supporting us on Ko-fi, especially since y'all don't get any special perks, maybe we should make some.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Literally could not do this without you. Such a privilege to be in this space. And we love taking on people's feedback because we want to be able to deliver our messages better. Yeah. So just thank you all, and
Love yous.
Don't be shy and don't be ashamed of sending us feedback.
Yeah.
Because this is really us opening ourselves up to say, hey, let's grow and let's really progress and let's try and create something that is actually useful. So again, e mihi ana kia tātou, mō tō manaakitanga, mō tō aroha, kia maua. We'll see you at Waitangi, hopefully.
See you at Waitangi.
And if not at Waitangi, we'll see you out there in the trenches somewhere. And if not out in the trenches, we'll see you online somewhere. So
Aye.
e mihi ana, kia tātou.
Oh, and Missy, yes, that is a very good question. We used to have a website that had our bank account number, but we stopped paying for our website because we realized it was very expensive.
Oh, it's a waste of money.
Waste of money. So we will put our bank account somewhere. I'll try and put it on the link tree.
On the Ko-fi, if you go in, there's a description or an about, and there's a bank account on there. So
Kapai.
Kia ora, Missy, thank you. But again, e mihi ana, kia tātou. We will see you out there.
Good night, everyone. Pō Mārie.
Kia pai te pō. And now the awkward, like, how do we close this? How do we shut?
Click.